Hello, everybody, and welcome to You Rankin with me. I'm Chad Webb, your host, your regular host. Down in the corner over there, we have James Tancock, the co-host. Kerri's usually on here. My wife, Kerri Webb. We got Charles Mullen over there. Good buddy, has been on a few times, and this is the second time with Mr. Dan Skip Allen. So we're all here to rank Mission Impossible movies. We actually have to go ahead and do this by law. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to rank the Mission Impossible franchise. This YouTube video will self-destruct in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
You should.
I think we're okay.
It didn't blow up.
Yeah.
It didn't explode.
Anyways, maybe I did. I don't know. Maybe I did. So we all, I think, did some rewatches. Maybe not. I know we did. We had a lot of fun. We didn't do a drinking game this time, but we were thinking about maybe the next time we do it. You know, we'll drink every time someone gets disavowed or they say disavowed.
Yes. Yes.
Every
time someone there's a mask switcheroo.
Yes.
Which
Yep.
good luck if you're watching Mission Impossible 2 for that one. There's so many things that you could do with Mission Impossible, I'm sure.
Yeah, we could do the doves just for the second one. That's a rule strictly for the second movie. So basically how this works, if you haven't seen any of the episodes before, is we've all ranked our separate list of Mission Impossible movies. There are 7 of them now. We're going to go through it basically from the bottom of our list to the top. So start with 7, then we're going to go to 1. We're just going to go around listing what we have at each spot. And then when we find kind of like a common movie that we're all like, this kind of belongs at this level particularly, then we will start talking about that movie. If there is a movie that someone says at number 7 is in your top 3, I would say wait for it, hold on that one. That's in my top 3. Whatever you got to say to let us know that you love that movie in particular a lot more than other people do. So that way we can talk about it a little bit later. Especially if it's in your top 3 or your number 1, because that's sacred. So we will we'll respect that. And then at the end we'll just have a total combined ranking for the entire panel, which Kerri is going to figure out as we go, because she's good like that. So if everybody's ready, we'll go ahead and start, and I'll just go first and I'll say what my number 7 is. My number 7, if no one can guess it, it is Mission Impossible 2. Kerri, what is your number 7?
My number 7 is also Mission Impossible 2.
Charles, is there a surprise here?
No, Mission Impossible 2.
James, 7.
Mission Impossible 2.
And Dan.
Mission Impossible 2.
All right, so we have it unanimous. I actually didn't think it was going to go any other way here.
I hope not.
But now
Yeah.
I am interested in this discussion now to find out the severity of bad you think this is, or if it's a good one that is just your lowest rank because you think all of these movies are good or something like that. So I'm interested to hear everyone's takes. I will just go ahead and start real quick. Mission Impossible 2, I've watched the entire franchise, I would say, but not every single one of these movies, because I would do it like every time a new one would come out, I'd watch them, and it's getting the list is getting a lot longer now to do, but it used to be a quicker watch. But now I've always I always dreaded watching Mission Impossible 2. I was like, this one is so boring. It's just, there's nothing really good about it, and it's just one that I have to watch to get through them again. And this most recent one, I actually found more enjoyment of it. I feel like it is kind of a carbon on one hand, it's a carbon copy of the first one where they're trying to do the same like beats and stuff, but it's also a John Woo movie. And I feel like this isn't like Face Off. This isn't like an original kind of movie. It's John Woo trying to put his stamp on this franchise. And I'm like, That is not what this franchise needed. What the franchise needed is kind of where we're at now, where it's like a high, spy espionage thing with like grand, epic stunts and stuff like that. So that's where we're going. And I feel like Mission Impossible 2 it could have led the franchise in a different direction had JJ not stepped in. So, I don't love this movie. I don't even know if I would say it's a good movie, but there are some stuff in it that I like. I do kind of like the Chimera thing. I think some of that is pretty fun. And some of the action sequences, I like the ending with the motorcycle chase and stuff like that. The only problem is it's shot really poorly. Like it's so like
constant jump cuts.
The jump cuts. That's what I was about to say. With just Tom Cruise like trying to kick someone. It's just like cut to him kicking, and it's like I'm sure the dude could actually kick someone if you wanted him to. So I just don't know why that like slow mo, the doves, just all the trademarks that I think work really well in something like Face Off that make it really cool. I just don't think really works, and it kind of makes turns Ethan Hunt into a hero that I don't really like in that movie because he's kind of like a more of a womanizer kind of a deal, going more in the James Bond route.
Yeah,
whereas I prefer him. I prefer the I'm a married man Ethan Hunt. So there's that, but I also do like the rock climbing sequence in the beginning. So yeah, but the villain is like kind of whatever, and there's just a lot of like, I could do without that moments in this movie. So it is what it is. Kerri, what do you think about this movie? I know you like it less than I do.
Yeah, I think this is like an actively horrible movie. It's to me, it's just painful to watch. Like Chad said, there are some good action sequences in there with the motorbikes and then the rock climbing. Those are really the only good parts of the movie, in my opinion. Like, I think the dialogue is very poor. It seems really sexist. Thandie Newton's character makes zero sense. To give them their credit, she and Tom Cruise are trying to get through the movie. But the dialogue is it's horrendous. Her character, I feel like changes her mind and has all these different motivations and like doesn't really have any cohesiveness. I'm trying to remember what else. I honestly, I do not care for John Woo's style. That's a big part of what makes this movie.
She doesn't like Face Off either.
I don't like Face Off either. I'd like this so much unnecessary slow-mo.
Yeah.
So many doves. And I would say it works more in something like Face Off, but here it's just like so out of left field. And especially given the whole context of this franchise, like the rest of the films, I think make sense and fit together. This one is just really just far apart from the rest. And I'll say this is the only one in the franchise I don't like. I really love all the other movies.
Totally fair. That's common sentiment. Charles, go ahead, buddy.
Yeah, I'm in complete agreement with Kerri here. I especially like that you shouted out. I think Thandie Newton or Thandie.
Yeah, I probably pronounced it wrong.
Newton. Now.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I think she is one of the only two good things in this movie. Like the dialogue she's given is George like Lucas like level, which is not great. But like she still like sells you because she's extremely emotive in this movie. She makes really silly over the top sequences feel real, like especially just like her interactions with Tom Cruise in the biosite sequence are really great. Just like a lot of the emotions that she just shows just through her looks. I felt really awful for her watching this movie because we now know like she's much bigger now. Like she was a huge part of Westworld, and that kind of gave her a lot of critical acclaim because of her acting in that. And it was just so horrible to see her in such a horrible movie. It just really honestly felt like I just wanted to reach out and be like, I'm sorry you got cast in the really bad one. Because like she deserves like a better Mission Impossible movie. I kind of, part of me watching it kind of wish she was brought back like Julia in future sequels in some odd fashion. I think the one other good thing I liked about this movie is I did enjoy the biocide sequence. I actually feel like this is the only sequence that actually works in the movie, and I think it's because it does mix in a little bit more of the tension. Like the beginning of the sequence is like kind of like a classic Mission Impossible 1 style of like you're just watching him like infiltrate silently, like start disrupting like samples. He's trying to do it quickly, but like no action at all. And then it goes into this absolutely ridiculous and over the top shootout sequence where bullets and glass is everywhere, so much slow mo. But like it only works for me because of how absolutely ridiculous it is. And I felt like it was the one moment where John Woo like kind of was just like, "Oh, I know how to do a gun fu fight. Like this is going to be easy." And it like works. Those are the only two sequences I think in the whole movie that work for me. My first reaction after finishing it was I felt like it was one of the worst movies I've ever seen in my life. But like it was also extremely funny at times as well. So like I can actually see myself rewatching this just to laugh at some point because like the bad is so bad it almost transcends into good territory. Like the doves at the end of the movie is it just keeps getting more and more absurd to the point where like the last dove sequence it's like hundreds of doves coming out of this as Ethan's running. You're just like, what is happening? Like I can imagine if you do a drinking game with that movie, like the end of it would just be like, what? Um, and like the martial arts fight between the villains at the end of this, I just kept thinking like, keeps going. Like, how is this fight sequence like now going on like 5 or 6 minutes? Like, I just kept thinking of the fight between Henry Cavill and Tom Cruise at the end of Fallout and being like, that was not even this long, and that was way better and more intense. It was just like it just kept getting worse. I think the way I'd wrap it up is like if kind of for a while Mission Impossible like each movie was kind of different in some way. I felt like maybe Mission Impossible 2 was trying to be a B movie, like a cheesy B movie. If it was, it kind of works on some levels, but it's really bad that you could potentially just never watch this movie and not miss anything about the Mission Impossible franchise.
Yeah, actually, that's absolutely right. I do think this one is definitely skippable. The one thing that I did want to add, I just remembered, I really like the opening of this, where you think it's Ethan with the guy, and it turns out it's
Oh,
the villain, which I
yeah,
think was pretty cool.
that was cool. It was interesting. Like every villain kind of has their niche, and his is just like he just loves doing the masks.
Yeah,
Like that's his like go to and
and then
everything.
he gets like foiled at the end with the mask because Ethan
Yeah,
pretends to be his second or whatever.
because
But
Ethan, in some time after like a grenade going off and him fighting 6 guys, like within 30 seconds, he had a mask made of the one of the dudes, and it was absurd, but it's funny.
James, what do you think about this one?
Yeah, this one really wasn't that great. I remember watching this in the movie theater when it came out, and I remember loving it because I was like 10 when it came out. It's like, oh, it's all explosions and guns and action. It's cool. And then actually, again, I was like, my God, that was awful. I mean, you're reminded very, very quickly if you didn't know it was a John. I forgot it was a John Woo film, to be honest. And I was halfway through, I was like, wait a minute, this is John Woo. And I was like, yeah, this is. And it's just, I think that style of like directing just doesn't work in this context. Yeah, like I think what Kerri said should be the movie's tagline is Mission Impossible 2, so many doves. That
Yeah,
really that to me is the weirdest of like it's the weirdest timed happening to like have them come out like all the just the over the top like you guys talked about the motorcycle it's cool and all it has some pretty good scenes but when they're on the road and they're spinning out in the two cars each other you get that kind of weird like I don't know what kind of music you call it but like I don't know it's music choices in some of the scenes it's just I think it's too over the top that Mission Impossible would be so it's not a rewatch if I watch the movie.
yeah,
Yeah, that's definitely for sure. And I also just remembered that speaking of the John Woo style, just like the Mission Impossible, music to the don't, like his whole thing is just so like rock music, like hard rock. I'm like, Doesn't fit.
Yeah, and I love it so much because that was a Limp Bizkit. That's a Limp Bizkit song they got to do for that movie.
Doesn't
So,
fit.
I mean, not
Dang.
really anymore. I mean, I will forever be listening to Limp Bizkit. I don't care that song is in there, but
Somebody's got to.
Thank you, Charles. I guess. I don't know. It's not that great, but it's things of my childhood that I kind of remember. But it's just not the movie. It just isn't.
You do bring up a good point. It's like very kind of like it's kind of a time capsule of like late 90s, early 2000s,
It's the
and
early 2000s.
And I will say
CGI and just falls prey to that. So
I will say it did
victim.
kind of like make me feel like warm in the heart where like he throws the thing, like the message at the camera and then it explodes and I'm like, man, like this is bringing me back to Spy Kids, man. This is great.
Yeah, for sure.
Dan, Mission Impossible 2, what do you think?
Yeah, you guys pretty much said everything about this. You know, I went last, and you guys all said what you guys were going to say. But yeah, I agree with the rock climbing sequence, the motorcycle sequence. You know, that stuff. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Was John Woo in the same camp as Michael Bay with like lens flares and all this kind of crap? It's like, dude, come on, man. We had enough doves and lens flares and all this junk. Well, have a plot. You know what I mean? And then the one thing about this movie, I'm glad. I mean, it's last on my list of Mission Impossible movies, but actually, there's a good thing about this movie, and we got Doug Ray Scott as the villain, and he chose this movie over X-Men. And so, guess what, guys? We got Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. What? So, thank you, Doug Ray Scott, for picking Mission Impossible too, because we got Hugh Jackman, and so that was the good thing about this. And now, have we ever seen Doug Ray Scott in anything ever since this? You know, so hi, Doug Ray Scott, the one movie you chose over X-Men. Now your career is ruined, and you don't have anything else. The one Mission Impossible movie that's stunk and nobody likes. So yeah, this movie's not that good. I mean, but they're like all the Mission Impossible movies that do have things about them that are redeeming qualities, like the rock climbing, like you said, and the motorcycle chase is pretty freaking amazing, you know?
Yep. It's just the fact that we get a better motorcycle chase later on. However, I will say, if you want to make an argument for this movie kind of like counting within the framework of Mission Impossible, it does kind of make sense where it's like a lot of the movies have something that shows a different aspect of Ethan Hunt and what he knows. So like the rock climbing, that comes in a lot later, especially in Fallout. Climb up the, so it's like one of those where it's like they've developed this character so much that he knows how to do all this stuff because he's done it before. He's shown you that he's honed in these skills. He's not just some superhero all of a sudden that doesn't practice this stuff. So, but yeah, let's get on to our next one. Kerri, what is your 6?
Okay. Oh, my 6 is Mission Impossible 3.
3. All right. Charles, 6.
I think that's going to be a hot take. But Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning 1.
Okay. All right. James, 6.
My number 6 is Mission Impossible 3.
All right. Dan, 6.
Number 6 is the original Mission Impossible. There's nothing good about that movie except that one scene where he's breaking into Langley. That's it.
I don't know if I agree with that specifically, but Mission Impossible 1 is also my number 6. So we have 2 for 1 and 2 for 3, and 1 crazy person for Dead Reckoning Part 1.
I will say MI3 is somewhere in my top 3.
All right.
Wow,
Oh wow,
okay.
nice. I can't wait.
I will do my best to try and defend it.
We will not be talking about Mission Impossible 3 right now because Charles just said a wait for it. So we'll wait for 3. Let's do our 5s and we'll see if we can narrow that down. Charles, what is your 5?
Mission Impossible 1.
Okay. James, 5.
Mission Impossible 1.
Dan, 5.
Mission Impossible 3.
That is also my 5 is Mission Impossible 3. Kerri, 5.
My 5 is the first Mission Impossible.
All right, so we can talk about the first Mission Impossible and then we'll
Cool.
get to 3 once we get to our like 3s or whatever.
Yeah.
All right. So I started the last one. Kerri, do you want to start the Mission Impossible one?
I can start this one. This is where I start actually liking the movie. So I enjoy this movie. I do think it is, though, of the like more enjoyable movies. And besides 2, it's the weakest of the franchise. It's a really cool setup. I think the twists are really cool in this, and like Dan said, that one scene, where he's rappelling down is amazing. We get introduced to a couple of the characters who, namely Ethan Hunt and, oh my God, Luther.
Luther, yeah.
Yeah.
Now it's been like a little bit since we watched that. And Luther. And we kind of grow to love them. So I'll say this movie is great for the setup of the world. But overall, I think the movies just got better over time. And actually, I had Mission Impossible 3 ranked lower. So forget what I said about it being kind of the worst besides 2. But
I was wondering. I was like,
I'm just losing track of everything.
That's okay.
I like it a little bit more than 3. It's a good setup, but I just don't think it holds a candle to the new run of films, the more recent run, the most recent 4 films.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's also a common sentiment. Charles. OG.
Yeah, I mostly overall like agree about Mission Impossible 1. I think overall the good outweighs the bad, and I am of the opinion that Mission Impossible 2 is the only bad movie in the franchise. I think all of the other movies are great, like just at a base level. But like Mission Impossible, it has a few things going against it. I think the first thing is, for me personally, I find the beginning of the movie extremely hard to watch because it basically kind of is a horror movie for the first like 30 minutes. You get endeared to this team and you watch all of them die pretty violently. Especially if we consider how death works in the other Mission Impossible movies. Usually it's a gunshot or like a stab and then they pass away. But in this one, it's just brutal, blood everywhere.
Stab in the face.
Decapitations, multiple shots, car bombings. And it just keeps getting worse. And you're like, oh my God, like, is he going to make it out? And like, you forget that, like, whenever I rewatch it, I always forget that the first like 45 minutes is basically all in one place, all one night. Everything's going wrong. And it all culminates in a really, really fun sequence with Kitteridge, who's only in the movie a little bit. And then luckily he comes back in Dead Reckoning Part 1. But I think it also speaks to the strength of this movie. I think the talking scenes, the espionage scenes are the best in this movie out of all the movies. I think just because of just how kind of dense the plot gets at a certain point, seeing him have to literally, like, for the completely work disavowed, like no allies, no resources, and even what he thinks is his closest ally is actually the true villain the entire movie. It felt like the movie was more about the confrontations of dialogue between characters than it was about the action. And I think the whole sequence is really impressive on a rewatch because there's barely any dialogue for most of that sequence. It's completely silent, completely show, don't tell, tense the entire time, barely even a shot fired. I think Ethan doesn't even shoot a gun in this movie. I could be wrong though. But like, that's impressive, let alone too the fact that he just gets all of this done without any gunfire at all. I feel like the last thing I kind of wanted to say is the climax. I feel like is really important. It may not be the best climax, but I think without this climax, I don't think we would have had the franchise to keep pushing itself further. Being like, well, the first movie ended with a helicopter in in a tunnel, and our hero jumping on that helicopter, blowing it up, and then jumping back on the train. Like, how can we top that? And I think that drove a lot of the franchise forward to be a lot about the set pieces. So even though the climax isn't the best, if we compare it to the rest of the series, I'm really thankful for it, and it still works. I think my last thing I wanted to say is, like, hit the magic trick sequence with Ethan in this movie. It's like such a small little scene, but I really love it because it endears you to him so quickly. Like him just constantly playing around with where the disc is. He keeps hiding it between different people. And apparently Tom Cruise is actually like a decent illusionist in real life. Like he can actually do magic. And so I think that's like one of my little details that I really love about Ethan, that you, and it pays off because like you need to really root for this guy enough to see him go through all the torture and the rest of the movies. So yeah, Mission Impossible is an amazing movie, but if we compare it to the rest, it's hard for it to compete.
Okay, cool. James, what do you think?
Yeah, I had Mission Impossible at number 5. Charles talked about a lot of really good points, and I will agree. The first time I saw this movie, I think it was before even the second one came out. This one came out in like '96, I think, so I was still pretty young. I almost couldn't get through the first part of it because I was like, you can't do that to all those people like that. They're supposed to be the good guys. How can you kill them off like that and stab them and blow them up and shoot them like that? I was like, that's crazy. But it kind of like really had me watching because I was like, holy crap, what's going to happen next? And I think all the sequences have been discussed already. They were done really well. I really, really liked how the movie went. I think when I saw the second one, I was, the first one was still way better. So I definitely like where I have it in my list. There's too much else in the subsequent that I like more. It does a good job of setting like kind of like the tone, expectation, and like what the stories like kind of could contain. But I think the other ones just kind of did it better. So this is a great movie, but I have a few others, just a lot more.
Absolutely. Dan, what do you think?
I had it at number 6 because I just think that when you, not just Mission Impossible movies, other spy movies, I just saw one this week called Heart of Stone, which Heart of Stone is better than this movie. Yeah, but we forget when these came out. You know what I mean? They spy movies with James Bond, Mission Impossible, and other types of spy type movies have gotten better. The set pieces have gotten better. The action sequences have gotten better as the years have gone by. So we forget that this came out almost 30 years ago, 20 something, 26 years ago. You know what I mean? Or whatever. So, and it was really revolutionary for the time with the going down and Langley, and then the helicopter in the top, and I'm a big John Reno fan. And I wish we could have seen John Reno more in this franchise going forward. He dies in the first movie, and I was kind of upset about that, but we get Luther, and then, I'm thinking to myself, Henry Czerny. Wow. I remember Henry Czerny, and then he comes back in Dead Reckoning.
Yeah.
Years later. It's like he's still around. The Kitcher's character is still around, Henry Czerny. And I just think that it was the dialogue is clunky. That whole killing all the people at the beginning is real clunky compared to today. Now, there'd be so much better editing, so much better character development and stuff. But I think that part of Mission Impossible is they get rid of members of the team each movie. You know what I mean? They die off. So I think killing some of the members off is par for the course for this franchise. They have had a few of the members like Simon Pegg, Luther, stuck around for a few movies now.
Yeah.
So I just think it's just the quality, and I like De Palma and whatnot. I just think the quality isn't there compared to some of the newer ones, or even 3. The quality is much better in 3 by the time it gets to 3, but that's just me.
Yeah, we'll get there. We'll start talking about Benji soon, very soon. But we're talking about the OG here. It's one of those where I know there are some people with the original and the third installment will try and say, you know what, I understand that from Ghost Protocol on, it's great, but I think that these are actually super, super underrated. I think in some ways they are, because some people might even say that the original movie is bad or just is not really good at all. And I disagree. I think it does have a lot of really endearing stuff, like what Charles said about the magician stuff. That comes up later in Dead Reckoning 1, and
good point.
And stuff like that. So it's like really cool to see all these skills that this guy has. Sleight of hand, rock climbing, stuff like that. And I think because we get the first one and then we get the second one. And the second one is such a step down that I think the third one feels like such a step up, and then up and up and up and up, potentially, depending on your ranking. At least is on a good line there, starting with like I think the fourth one, maybe the third one. That I think a lot of people kind of forget that the first one is kind of a quality movie. It is the start of the franchise. It was a remake of a TV show, which I haven't seen the TV show, but the adaptation of that, and I think it was really well done. I do like the setup. I don't know how much I like what John Voight as the like ultimate villain or whatever. I think that might be a little not one of the weaker aspects. I'm not really sure. I do think that the sequence where he propels down and then you have John Reno up there with the rat and all that stuff. That's a pretty, I was sad to see the rat die, but that's one of the things like I'm like, oh, but other than that, it's like such a classic sequence that I think that one would rank very highly, even though it's not like the Burj Khalifa or some other things that we'll get that are grander. But I think that one, the way it's like, directed and edited and all that stuff is just so good. My only nitpicks are the rat thing, and then also the levels, how far he is from the floor. I'm not sure he can actually catch a drop of sweat. I was like, he's so close to the floor. How can he get his hand down there? But that being said, it's still classic. I even like the end sequence with the train. I think is pretty fun. And we've been seeing a lot of that recently with train stuff and Dial of Destiny and Dead Reckoning Part One. So yeah, it's a go-to, I guess. But yeah, it's fun. There's a lot of intrigue. The computer stuff with the Job and all that stuff is kind of cool to see the old technology and them like searching the internet for Job and what does this mean? It is kind of cool. But
we get to see an early version of the White Widow as well. We get to see the White Widow's mom in that movie.
Yeah,
who's the person that they have a funeral for, which is kind of little continuity stuff. That's kind of nice.
Yeah,
Vanessa Redgrave.
Yep.
Yes. I think also, I could be wrong, Chad, but I think John Voight's character is supposed to be the main character from the TV show. And he is, and because he has the same name, and apparently, I haven't watched the TV show either, but the explanation is that like he's just so fed up with the BS after having to do that through a whole TV show that he goes and defects and becomes who he is in that movie.
But anyways, I still have this at 6 just because I think after 2 it just keeps going up and up. So Kerri, what do you think about the OG?
I started.
You started. That's right. All right. So now we're gonna go to. We have another one to discuss now, don't we?
No.
All right. We're gonna go to our.
Don't most of us have three at either 5 or 6 though? Besides Charles. Charles that does it.
We'll get there, and then like the next 2 because we're almost at the top 3. So we'll get to 3 in a second. James, what is your 4?
I had Mission Impossible 4 Ghost Protocol.
Ghost Protocol. All right. Dan, what is your 4? I know someone in this has Ghost Protocol very highly, so we'll see. Dan, what is your 4 though?
My number 4 is Dead Reckoning, Part 1.
Dead Reckoning Part 1. All right, and my number 4 is also Ghost Protocol. Kerri, what is your 4?
My number 4 is Dead Reckoning.
Okay. Charles, what is your 4?
Ghost Protocol.
Ghost Protocol. All right. So let's go ahead and discuss Ghost Protocol, and then we can immediately after that go into Mission Impossible 3 because we will be at the 3s, or we could say our 3s and then go into Mission Impossible.
It doesn't matter.
3.
We could also discuss Dead Reckoning unless that's I get it would be in a lot of people's 3s actually. So
it's in at least
point,
a couple.
So we're it
doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter. Let's go to Ghost Protocol now, and then we'll go to 3.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So. Kerri, you started last.
Yeah.
So Charles, Ghost Protocol.
Okay. So Ghost Protocol, I think it's kind of the saying with Ghost Protocol that like this is what the movie that's responsible for really kind of the well-oiled engine that Mission Impossible is today, because like from Ghost Protocol on, like yes, each sequel takes a few years, but they're pretty like relatively even on quality.
Well,
I think
wait a minute, Charles. Not to interrupt. How do
Sure.
we talk about Ghost Protocol? We don't get to talk about 3 when somebody doesn't. Somebody has Ghost Protocol higher. I'm sorry. I don't want to be.
So you actually have a good point. Do we want to just go into 3 then?
Yeah, we can do 3.
Talk
Go
about
ahead with
3.
3,
Most
Charles.
things have to be high, like
Actually-
at 5 and 6, right?
Well, Dan actually makes a very good point, because I think Ghost Protocol is ranked the highest for someone. So Charles, you go with 3, especially because you have a Mission Impossible 3 defense, because you have it ranked very high.
Yes. So I have Mission Impossible 3 at my number 3 spot, and I'm gonna do my best to defend it here, even though it has a lot of problems.
I don't hate it.
Um,
I love it, but go ahead.
I think for me, if I had to pick the best opening of the franchise, it's easily Mission Impossible 3 for me, because the Kerri Russell's in this for a brief moment, but she really makes an impact. And really makes you feel for her. I love the fact that as soon as she gets the adrenaline shot, she instantly goes into like she knows what to do with the gun. She's clearing with Ethan. Even the way she dies is just brutal. Like everything about that whole sequence is great, and it really does help you understand why Ethan is so protective of Julia and wants to find some way to separate his life. And her last words are, "Ethan, thank you." It's just like, if I had to figure out one scene to really define a character, it'd be that scene. Like Ethan, just it really, that stuff hits him hard. I think also this movie sets up, which I believe is a series long thesis at this point, which is, can an agent like Ethan Hunt maintain a close, loving relationship while also saving the world? And as the movies have progressed, we've seen him attempt to, but unable really to make it work. And that whole story starts here. Essentially, someone could start at Mission Impossible 3 and have a really well told story all the way up to Fallout. And I feel like it's kind of a lot of the little crumbs that really pay off in the later movies, I feel like really owe a debt to this movie for starting it down that path. And Michelle Monaghan is amazing in this movie. She makes you at least understand why someone like her would like put up with Ethan's bullshit, because like she just loves him, and it's very easy to get that. I think this movie also has a really chaotic energy, both as a strength of J.J. Abrams and also a negative. It's a lot of close-ups, a lot of shaky cam, a lot of handheld, but it does help with certain sequences like the bridge ambush when they start getting hit by a drone. Like that whole sequence is so great because you don't expect it to happen. There's noise everywhere, explosions. His teammates are cut off. They can't help him. He's cut off. And he's just trying to make it down the bridge. It's basically another version of the lane sequence from Fallout. And it just does a really good job of making you kind of get sucked into his mindset. I also want to shout out, I think this leads into, I think, what I ultimately think is why I put this movie so high, is the interrogation sequence that starts the movie and kind of ends it in a way is absolutely amazing. It is one of the best sequences, I think, in Mission Impossible history. Like, I don't think Mission Impossible has ever been more intense than that in a way. And it's a credit to a lot of things, but the camera work is also really good here because it's just literally subdued to just his face. And it helps a lot of the reveals that come later in that sequence have more impact, because for Ethan, he's just being so tortured right now. He can just see what's in front of him. There's also some other great camera work in the one-shot sequence by the river where it just tracks Tom Cruise running on the rooftops for like what seems like minutes on end. J.J. Abrams, literally, he can provide you with some of the best sequences and some of the worst. I think the last thing I wanted to say about this movie, and this is the true reason why I have it as my top 3, I think Philip Seymour Hoffman is an absolute menace in this movie. I think a lot of people, I think in here might have a more favored villain, but I think he is by far the best villain. He's incredible in this movie. Technically, Ethan never really beats him. The only reason he like wins is because of the kind of collaboration between him and his wife. They're able to kind of outbeat him at the end of that sequence, but like just he constantly has a plan for Ethan. He constantly knows what he's going to do, and he just keeps it level the entire time. And the interrogation sequence is like a masterclass for Philip Seymour Hoffman. And it's just like, I don't know, whenever I see that movie, I get sucked into his performance and I'm instantly like, man, I wish you were around for more than one movie, because just the ethos he provides by being in it. He's the only one that like I feel like if he's opposite Tom Cruise, you're like, yeah, that guy can win. I also just want to do a quick shout out to Billy Crudup. He has kind of a thankless role, but he kills it too. I think when he sits down at the end of the interrogation sequence and he does this long sigh and Ethan's like, what? And he says, it's complicated. That's like the best line reading ever. Every single time that happens, I laugh because I'm like, oh my gosh, he got him. So I guess that's me defending Mission Impossible 3. I can totally understand why some people have it as a lower movie. But for me, so many of my favorite things like started here in this movie.
Yeah, I completely agree. I just wanted to say a couple things. Philip Seymour Hoffman, fantastic actor. Gone too soon, of course. Great in the movie. I hope his because I loved his son in Licorice Pizza. I hope he continues to have a good career because he was really good in that movie. And then the other thing is you mentioned the opening sequence with Kerri Russell.
Mm-hmm.
You talked about the opening for the original being kind of like a horror movie. That moment where she says thank you and then it cuts her off and she goes, that scares the shit out of me every time and I can't even watch it. I'm like, tell me when it happens because it's just so creepy. But yeah, anyways.
It's wild. Oh.
But yeah, James, what do you think about Mission Impossible 3?
Yeah, Mission Impossible 3, it's definitely a good movie. I like it a lot. I think it really kind of put Mission Impossible like back on my radar as far as like if they were to do sequels at the time when I watched it at least. I really, really liked Philip Seymour Hoffman as the villain. He did such an incredible job. He's just truly menacing. Every like line of dialogue delivers it so well, just so intense. It makes him so scary. I think it finally shows that like they can kind of have like the proper villain in this movie or like this series as well. I think I was just a little bit leery because it was definitely better than the second one. As much as I like the first one a little more, I think it really kind of revitalized like my interest in this one. But the movie that came after just kind of outclassed it a little bit, despite having such great scenes and sequences. It's great, but I think there's just better ones, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think it depends on like what you want out of your Mission Impossible. But Dan, what do you think about 3?
Yeah, I agree with what Charles said and what James said. I think the thing that's great about this movie is Philip Seymour Hoffman as the villain. He's like the best villain in the Mission Impossible franchise, as far as I'm concerned. He just is so menacing, and the framing sequence is done. It's probably one of the best framing sequences I've ever seen. A lot of movies do framing sequences. This is probably one of the best ones, right? You see the end of the movie at the beginning, and then you get the finish of it, at the end. And like I said before, though, you just get members of the team that just don't end up moving on from movie to movie. And Kerri Russell, just one of those people that ends up, getting. I think it was one of those, hey, I work with J.J. Abrams, so I'm going to get a cameo in here or whatever. Yeah. Sometimes these filmmakers will put like in the latest Guardians of the Galaxy, what's his face is in there as one of the guards of that one base. What's his face? Who works with James Gunn all the time. What's his name? Huh?
Dave Bautista? I don't. Who are you saying?
Oh, remember he cast him as Green Lantern in one of the Green Lantern, in the DC Green Lantern movie that they're going to be doing or something. Remember he's in a show right now where he's a police officer. He's like the rookie. He's the rookie.
Oh, you mean Fillion?
Nathan Fillion.
Oh, yeah. That's right.
You always put their buddy there, and the same thing with Greg
right.
Grunberg. Greg Grunberg was in Star Wars and all the stuff J.J. Abrams was doing. These directors like putting their buddies in these movies, you know. So Kerri Russell was in there. She, you know, but all the movies have that where the characters just don't move on from the next movie. You know, it's just the nature of being spies, I guess. That's what they're saying. Hey, and then once again, I'm agreeing with you guys. The stuff with his wife, I love Michelle Monaghan. I love the stuff with his wife. I love the stuff where, you know, he does start to figure out, well, I can't have a personal life and have this life because it's going to conflict with one another, because people are going to use my personal life against me when they want to try to kill me or whatever. And so they're going to take my wife hostage and all this kind of stuff. So we do get more of the personal stuff with Ethan Hunt, which was really good in 3. I do like this movie. I just think the other ones are just so much better when it comes to like the action sequences, and they just keep upping the ante every time. But this one, they do all get better from 3 all the way up, except I'd say Dead Reckoning drops down a little bit because some of the plot and stuff, but we'll get into that.
Yeah. All right. Great points. All right, Shipmate, what do you think about Mission Impossible 3, buddy? Go ahead.
Kitty.
Did you watch this one? Did you?
Ship said he really liked Kerri Russell, and he really liked Kerri Russell and The Americans as well, and he thinks that's a great show.
And The Diplomat is amazing.
Yeah, I've heard The Diplomat's good too.
And isn't she in The Waitress? She's great in that, right?
Yeah.
Oh God, so good. The Waitress.
Kerri Russell's underrated.
Waitress, that's not The Waitress.
Shout out Kerri Russell if you're watching this.
That's what.
The waitress makes you want to go eat a bunch of pie, and right now I'm hungry and I don't want to talk about food.
Justin Timberlake told them just to drop the and just Waitress.
That's true. That's true. I remember that.
But I'll go ahead and start talking about 3. Mission Impossible 3. I think is pretty excellent. I know when I'm going through my watch, I watched the first one mostly out of obligation. I'm like, I gotta watch the first one. It's the classic, and then I like it. And then 2, I go like, I kind of hate this, but some of it's kind of cool. And then the third one, I get really excited. This is the one that I start getting really excited to start watching through the series. And then I know for me, I think it just gets better from there. And then I just, I don't want to reveal my ranking, but I know like 4 through 7 are just really good. But yeah, the third one, it starts ramping up. I love the direction that they take Ethan. And I think I'm right there with Charles, where I think that like, instead of being, because they could have easily had him be like James Bond, where he's the womanizer, and every single time he has the hunt girl, who's the hunt girl of the movie kind of a deal. And instead he has someone that he's like betrothed to, that he wants to be with, but he's struggling. It's kind of like Spider-Man in a way. It's like trying to balance the 2 lives of Ethan Hunt. And, he ends up, they end up marrying like at the end. And then it's, different in the next movie a little bit. We get a little bit of backstory with what happened to him and Julia. But, that whole love that he has for her, like Charles said, has persisted like throughout the entire series. And I think that's some of the best parts of Fallout too. So, that all started here. Like we were talking about the horror movie beginning or whatever. Mission Impossible 3 with Kerri Russell is pretty scary, but it does add some like depth to him and training and people and stuff like that. Philip Seymour Hoffman is incredible. If you had to rank villains, if he's not number 1, he's definitely like top 2 or top 3. There's not that many villains, but he's up there for sure. And I do think he makes that movie. This was my first Mission Impossible in the theater, I think. You weren't there.
He definitely wasn't there.
I've seen every one of them in the theater, Chad.
That's nice. No, but I wasn't even a fan of Mission Impossible before this movie came out. over the shoulder, and then maybe he'll quiet. But I remember seeing the trailer for this movie, and I got really excited. And I was like, "That's a franchise I really want to get into and
Yeah.
start liking." Because this was what 2006, so I was like 16. So I was like, yeah, okay. And then I started to get into it, and I really liked the highway sequence. I thought that was pretty incredible. I love the Billy Crudup stuff. I like when he does the quick mouth thing, like he was mumbling the words.
Yeah, isn't this the first movie we learn also that Ethan can like lip read really well? Like, is this the first movie where we learn that? Because like we get introduced to it when he's like in the kitchen at the party, and like the friends are like talking, and they're like, "We feel like he's listening to us," and they're like, "There's no way." And then Ethan like looks at the camera, and you're like, "Oh my gosh, he just read that entire conversation." That is a cool little thing about him, though.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, there's a lot of cool stuff. Like I said, he's revealing things about him, things he can do at like every movie, pretty much. And it's not just the big stunts, but these like little things, like even in this one, he reveals like how many languages he knows because he speaks like fluent Italian when they go. And I always forget if you have like sequences like that in the movie. I forget about that whole Italian sequence and stuff like that. But yeah, this movie is pretty incredible. I love the end stuff. I love how he has to basically kill himself and then have Julia just like everything's moving so fast. And she's like, what? What do I do? And then he's like, here's how to work a gun. You got to do it real quick. You got to learn how to do it. And then like, shock me. I'll come back. I swear. And she's like freaking out because like she like woke up there, I think, or something like that. All this is happening so fast. We also get like, I think the first really great, maybe other than the exploding water thing in the first movie, but this is when he's like running through the street or whatever, and you get that like long like tracking shot of him running, which is so great. And yeah, I love that end sequence. I think it's really sweet and really awesome and intense. So I think 3 is pretty incredible. Kerri, what do you think of Mission Impossible 3?
Yeah, 3 is really good. I really, really enjoy this one. For me, it's just my number 6, I think, because I enjoy the other ones more. And I feel like this one, like the franchise still just hasn't found its footing yet. Even though it's the 3rd movie. I would say it's still different from the most recent 4, I guess. And the most recent 4, I think, are just on a different level than this one.
Yeah, it's like the beginning to go, but like JJ wasn't the guy to
there's just certain things too that when I watch this movie, I'm like, wow, this is just, you can tell this was made in the mid 2000s. Just some of the ways it's shot, I think like Ethan's hair in this movie, for whatever reason, it just really bothers me. I know that's everybody, but it bothers me the whole time. So for me, it's just not as enjoyable as the most recent 4.
Yeah, no, it wasn't JJ to propel us into the future of Mission Impossible. It was the man who gave us The Incredibles, Mr. Brad Bird. But we will get there in a second. What I want to do here is, because Dan's absolutely correct. I know Dan absolutely adores Ghost Protocol, so I want to wait for that one real quick.
Yeah, Dead Reckoning should be first.
I want to do Dead Reckoning Part 1, and I want James to start that one, if he's okay with that.
Sure, yeah, talk about Dead Reckoning. All right.
Go ahead, buddy.
All right. So I did the thing with this ranking where like I kind of had to look it over like 3 or 4 or 5 times because I put Dead Reckoning at the top. And it's one of those things. Yeah.
Wow.
Like, I can't believe that I'm really ranking these in this order. So kind of does the like I think the stakes and the scale of like the overall situations they find themselves in just improves over these movies, and I think the whole concept of like the AI thing is really, really cool. This one brings in, you still have Faust, what's her name? Why can I not think of her?
Ilsa Faust.
Thank you. Yes, yeah. And that's just done so well. Like you really don't like want her to be dead, but like is she? But like I'm pretty sure it was on the screen this time. So like I'm pretty sure it's set like that. But Hollywood, like I don't know what to see do with that in the future, if at all. But like
Was it her face?
I know exactly. Yeah, exactly. So we'll see what they do. But I like the scale of this. I think the concept is really cool. I like the intro shot submarine, like it tricking it into shooting itself. You do get Henry Cerny coming back as Kerri, so I like that a lot. Again, another face mask scene. One part of this scene I'll do my thing about here, but the office is in a warehouse and it has windows, and none of those warehouse workers saw the green mist fill the entire room immediately and questioned that. Fair enough, but
They're busy.
I guess we'll give them a pass for that one. So a little weird thing there, but it is what it is. I mean the stunts are great. When he jumps off the side of the motorcycle. I know they kind of shit in like the ads and the previews and the promos. And sometimes I think it kind of takes away from it when they kind of ruin that stuff. Like your whole movie centered around this one cool scene, but there was so much more cool to it. Also, that scene was still great because the context in which it takes place is still like really, really kind of like edge of your seat. So like I like that a lot about the movie too, if it can still do that despite showing some of the scenes in the trailers. I like we get a bit of Mantis not being Mantis in this one. Shouldn't have that many lines, but it's cool to see her driving that huge APC type thing around Rome. That's a real nail biter too. I like the whole car chase. I know it's not the most like inventive thing. We've never seen a car chase in Mission Impossible before, so maybe some might not kind of like that. But I thought it was great. I like the way it was done. The bits with him and Haley Atwell are just so good. I like her introduction into this a lot. I think he keeps it a little bit too light sometimes, like with the giggling and laughing, like kind of running around the airport like that. But even that was done well, like with them kind of putting Ethan's face on like the screen so the people following him couldn't see him. You get another little acting bit from Shea Wiggum in this one, which he's a pretty cool actor. I like watching him in one of the movies he makes. The end is awesome. The train scene is amazing. It's such a great. It's just done so well. I like the way it's shot. I had to have Dad kind of tell me what happens at the very, very end though, because I fell asleep in it. I think both times I tried to watch it actually because it's so long and we watch it in a Regal theater, and I love my Regal, but they don't put the AC on in their movie theaters, so I fell asleep right at the end there. So I dozed off on some pretty important parts, I think. But it sets up the next one so well, and I know that might be a talking point for some folks why they put a little bit lower. There's no like real, actual, singular bad guy here, and you kind of got to give it its chance to see what happens in part two. But this one, I mean, it ups the stakes. It ups the scenes, the shots are great, all the stunts are amazing. They just keep doing better and better with these. So I still think this is my top one. I just love watching this one so much. It's great.
Yeah, I had it at number 4. And I just think the plot is really clunky here. But I mean, I agree with almost everything you say, James. I really do. They have so many different types of action sequences, like the stuff going on in the train in the plane station. All that stuff is kind of interesting. Then you got them. They allude to they're going to get this nice fast car, and they end up in a Fiat. Yeah. And that stuff racing around Rome is fucking burning. With flipping the handcuff and all that. That stuff is and I think part of merchandising and marketing a movie is to get people excited. So the fact that they were showing him like, this is what we're doing. We're going to be jumping off a cliff. We're going to be doing this. But then they don't show you the whole sequence. And then when you're watching that sequence, because they cut, the editing is amazing. Yeah. And then he comes through the train. And they're like, holy crap, that's how we got to the train. How we got to the train, And it just, the banter between him and Simon Pegg's character, and then they really have gotten a really good rapport with one another, Luther and Simon and him, and then throwing Haley Atwell in it. But I think the weakest part is the plot and the villain. The villain is just not that good a villain. But I did like Mantis. What the
Tom Clemente.
Tom Clemente.
She's
I
great.
liked her, and I like the fact that she had a
a change of heart in this movie, you know, because he did save her, and then later on she ends up saving him. So they have that callback. But yeah, you knew. I mean, the thing about this is you knew once the thing with the submarine it shot itself and it was on the submarine, the bottom of the ocean. You knew they were going to get to that submarine in the second movie. I mean, it's so obvious. So I mean, what are they trying to do here? I mean, anybody that watched the movie knows that they have to go into the water in the next movie to get the thing out of the submarine. That's so obvious, you know. It's just, I guess, is it going to be the opening scene or the end scene or whatever it is? You know what I mean? Because we know it's going to come. It's another water sequence. We're not going to get into water sequences right now. We'll get that down the road here. But yeah, I mean, I did like Dead Reckoning quite. I've seen it twice. I've seen it in IMAX, and I've seen it in something. I don't know what the heck I saw it. I think it was IMAX and Dolby both times, 2 different times I saw it. So the Dolby was better than the IMAX, to be honest with you. But yeah, I have it 4 because I just like the other 3, Fallout, Rogue Nation, Ghost Protocol better.
Yeah, this one's interesting because as soon as I kind of have it like the same way. I think I'm at the same kind of mindset as James, where I'm like, except for 1 and 2 being reversed, am I gonna have it like where it's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, you know, all the like up like that, and 7's just gonna be my number 1? And after seeing 7, I was like, shit, I think so, because I loved it. I thought it was incredible. I thought it was like so fun. I love all the parts that you guys are talking about with like the, you know, racing around in the little yellow car, handcuffed together, him like having to take off the steering wheel and dive out of the car, and just being pursued by Pom Clementif, who I adore, as like, you know, this mad woman chasing them in this like big truck, and she's like laughing and just like having a really good time. I loved everything like about her character. Haley Atwell, I thought was a great addition. I understand that there is a big outcry about Ilsa Faust or Rebecca Ferguson in the movie and like what happened to her. But honestly, I think what we're going to get is I think we're going to get a lot more from her character in the second one. I could be wrong. She could just be dead. And spoilers, we already talked about that. She could just be dead. And, you know, we're going to get just like more like of them like talking about her and kind of mourning when they have time to do that. But right now they're still in the middle of a mission, like 1 mission, 2 probably very long movies. But honestly, I think that they earned the length. I never feel like, I know James was talking about like, you know, we were like dozing off a little bit towards the end. But I think it's because we were very tired. I'm a dad now, so going to the theater sometimes, shit. I was like kind of tapping out a little bit in the middle of Oppenheimer. So goes to show you how much I fall asleep in movies sometimes now. But I'll try to rest before I go. But I do think it's incredibly fun. I wouldn't be mad if somebody said that they ranked this one lower because it's a part 1, because it's an obvious part 1 that they say is a part 1. And then you go like, I can see what they're setting up, but does it feel like a complete movie like on its own? I think it does. I think, you know, if you're going to say like Fellowship is a complete movie on its own, or any of the Lord of the Rings, even though they're all actual like parts of a series, I think this one works too, because I think everything that it sets up is, I'm so excited for what's to come, like what they're setting up for, to see, you know.
Can I just say something real quick, Chad? Not to interrupt. I apologize. You know what though? Somebody, I was on some podcast with somebody, and maybe it was you guys. I don't remember who the hell said it, but if they never said Dead Reckoning Part 1, they just said Dead Reckoning, right? And then to be continued. Would that have made this movie more money, do you think, instead of, oh, it's Dead Reckoning Part 1, and then down the road we say, oh, it's actually Dead Reckoning Part 2? Because I think a lot of people complain that the fact that this thing didn't make as much money as they thought, and I'm wondering if that was a marketing mistake on their part.
It's potentially that. There's also like a lot of like different stuff with it because of the whole Barbenheimer thing. Like that's kind of like an unprecedented thing that we never knew was going to take off like that. So
Yeah,
that
everybody did.
whereas if they would have like pushed Dead Reckoning towards like November, something like that.
Or
But
the sixth. The sixth.
yeah, I also
Friday the sixth.
don't think that you're wrong. I think potentially, although I like the fact that it is a part one. I kind of agree. Like I don't need the part one. If they would have said Dead Reckoning and then continued, and then they would have did like the It thing where it's like now no, it's It chapter 1, and then there's a chapter 2 coming. That
I
fine.
think what happened was not to derail this conversation, but when people found out they were doing 7, was it 6 and 7? Yeah, it's 6 and 7, right?
7 and 8.
7 and 8 back to back. That kind of gave it away that they were going to be connected, you know, and that's maybe why they ended up going with the Dead Reckoning part.
Well,
But,
yeah, and in a sense, you know, you can look at Rogue Nation and Fallout as its own little duology within the franchise, and then now we're getting the 2 Dead Reckonings. It's just they have like the same title, part 1, part 2. But I do think that this one is more of an obvious part 1 because of a lot of the stuff that it's setting up. But it doesn't, you know. So I have Dead Reckoning part 1 at 3. I was thinking about putting it at 1, but then I thought about it and I was like, this one might end up going higher if part 2 comes out and it's blows my mind and it's a great part 1, part 2. Then I could see putting both parts higher. But for now, I was like, it's a very fun movie. But overall, I think other ones in the franchise might be more cohesive wholes. But I do love everything in this movie, especially Pom Klementif. As soon as they were like, you know, she's still alive, I was like, yes. It's like, you don't kill her off because I don't want to see that. So I love that they're keeping a lot of these characters alive so that you can continue this story. You know, it's like getting the key is just the beginning kind of a deal. And then I loved all of that too, where the placement of the key, like who has the key, and then who has the lighter, and that was a really fun joke. You know, and then I just got to say, of sequences, I do love the jumping off of the thing. I love that, you know, Benji, who I love Benji. He's probably my favorite character. Benji basically telling Ethan when he's about to jump off the cliff that he's under a lot of pressure right now. It was pretty great. And then I love the stopping the train. It's kind of like a big Spider-Man 2 moment, but then you have the thing, and they have to go through each car. And like, it's so like, you know, extreme and intense, and I love it. So yeah, I talked a lot about this one, but I actually really do love Dead Reckoning Part 1. It's kind of my spiritual number 1 because I could see myself probably watching it the most because I think it's just so fun. Yeah, Kerri, what do you think about Dead Reckoning Part 1?
I'll try to make this quick because he's not letting me sit down. This is my number 4. I really enjoy it. I think it's, you know, very much in the spirit of this new set of Mission Impossible films, and it's very fun. Like, I really agree with what everyone said about the new characters that are brought in, and the stunt sequences in this film. I'll say it's lower on my list for 3 reasons. One is Ilsa Faust, and I hope. Well, I'm gonna say not even that I hope. I believe that she's still alive.
You're the one that actually like said, I don't think she's dead. I was like,
yeah.
Oh my God, you're right.
But there are a couple things that bother me, and at this point between these 4, I'm just honestly nitpicking. But one thing was in the beginning of the movie with the Russians in the submarine, they speak English. Like, I think they say one sentence in Russian, apparently. Yeah. They speak English the rest of the time. But to me, I'm like, Tom Cruise, if you're such a, like, you know, we got to do it for real, whatever, like, you can apply that to the language as well.
Yeah. I felt like there was something to do with like the mechanics of the AI, which I think is a really cool villain, by the way, the AI. I think maybe it was like translating in a way, because I thought that's why it started in Russian and then it translated to English, but I don't know how that works.
Maybe.
So
I don't
I have
know.
no idea.
That's a serious nitpick. The thing
Mhm.
that actually bothered me, for real, was when Haley Atwell takes over Vanessa Kirby's personality, like, wears her face or whatever.
Yeah.
And we know the eyes, yes. And Vanessa Kirby has these extremely distinctive and prominent blue eyes, and Haley Atwell has brown eyes. And it was so obvious to me. And I was like, okay, well, they must be doing this for a point, or they're going to address it or something. No. And Chad kept being like, well, their machine broke down. And I was like, contacts aren't a machine. Those are separate. And we've seen earlier in this franchise, just the contact.
They do contact.
Even that I could forgive. But the worst part of it is that, like, Vanessa, the White Widow's, I don't think it's her brother, but it's like her bodyguard, her the partner. Guy who's her partner, who's always with her, doesn't notice that her eye color has changed. Are you kidding me? That to me just
maybe that's just not something we noticed.
And I was like, that's a real, like, in this franchise where you've previously established that people are wearing contacts to disguise themselves. To me, it was just a little bit. That's such a nitpick, though. I really love this movie.
It's kind of a James thing where he's like, did you see the gun?
Right, she's right. I complained about that when I wrote my review. That is a complaint that I had watching this. That's such a bad. And I think they did it on purpose. They wanted you to notice that wasn't Vanessa Kirby.
Yeah, and I can't. Why do you think we're that stupid when previously in this franchise we've just had people trading faces the whole time? We know they make it so obvious that it's Haley Atwell.
We didn't know that guy at the beginning was wearing a mask with Tom Cruise. Come on, I mean, this is so odd. The way he was skulking around, he was hanging in the back. Like, come on, man. Like, come on, don't make it so obvious with the masks.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, definitely. Charles, Dead Reckoning Part 1.
Yeah, this is a tough one for me. I had it as my number 6, and I think it's still a really great movie, and I think I came away with it just having a lot of fun, but also feeling like this deep sense of disappointment I had as well. And I think it's like a complicated disappointment. I think if I start with the positives first, I think Haley Atwell is like amazing in this movie. And apparently, like, behind the scenes is that Haley Atwell was originally supposed to play Elsa. But because of scheduling conflict, she wasn't able to. So I feel like this is kind of like the director being like, I meant Haley Atwell to play Elsa previously. It didn't work out, but I'm going to bring her in as a new character this time around. And she's great. I love she does a great job of building chemistry with Tom Cruise, like in the airport sequence and the Rome chase. It makes it easy to cheer for her because, to be honest, like, the plot is, I'll agree with you, Dan, on the plot, and I'll get to that in a little bit, but the plot makes it at sometimes really difficult to cheer for her. But because it's Haley Atwell, it's like, well, it's fine. It's Haley Atwell. I have to stan her. I think the other really fun parts about this movie is how many homages there are to the first movie, not just in the climax, but the return of Kitteridge is awesome. I love Kitteridge. He's great in that first movie. And bringing him back does a good job of providing kind of a full circle moment for Ethan. I especially love the return of the theme of revenge, like how Ethan has to be pressured. Like the second half of the story is all about, will he cross that line? And I think that works pretty well too. I think the chase scene in Rome is probably the standout sequence for me. Benji, Luther are amazing in this movie again. Tom Cruise is awesome. There's so many things to cheer for. Palm Clementif is amazing too. But like, I have to kind of get into my disappointments here with the movie. And I think the first one, it has to be Elsa. I think I'm with Kerri in that, like, the way Elsa was handled in this movie was like very hard to watch. but I might even like, for me, I am still holding out hope for part 2, because like if there it just, in my opinion, it has to be addressed with further, because Ilsa, just the death sequence, the lack of mourning for her, just how quickly things move. It makes sense in part 1 because like the end of the world is about to happen, so it makes sense why they don't mourn. But there needs to be more in part 2, because if there isn't, it's gonna really, I feel like it's even gonna hurt my appreciation of Rogue Nation and Fallout, and I feel
Maybe a
bad for
funeral
saying that.
sequence of the movie.
Yeah, like maybe she'll come back in part 2. Maybe there's like a secret switcheroo. Ethan does that all the time. Or maybe, she left a video for Ethan that she'll discover, like Scream 3 style. I don't know. Like, that there needs to be more. And I think, like, I'm hoping that the director is hearing kind of because like Mission Impossible, you're right, is known for killing off squad members, but Ilsa is not any normal squad member. Ilsa is quite possibly the MVP of the two of the greatest Mission Impossible movies, and there was still a story that was being built with Ethan. I think we can see that her individual story kind of ends in Fallout in a really satisfying way, but her story with Ethan continues, which is the whole point of the end of Fallout, is seeing that now Ethan is the one, or Ilsa is now the one at Ethan's side, not Julia.
Well, I have
So
an idea.
there needs
Real
to be
quick,
more there.
Charles. I have
Yeah.
an idea, Charles, not to interrupt you. So I apologize, guys. Well, you know how the Fast franchise have spun off some of their characters. What if they find a way to spin off that character into her own thing?
Oh,
You know,
that'd be
and then
great.
Maybe she loops back around and comes back somehow
Yes,
in the second part of this or something. You don't know. I don't
that'd
know.
be great.
You know,
No,
Yeah.
I think that'd be great, because they're kind of doing that in some. I think John Wick is going down that road a little bit too.
Fast
But
and Furious, John Wick. You're right. Yeah.
I love that idea. I think that could help kind of ease the loss of her in this movie. But like, I wouldn't necessarily go as far to say that this is a fridging. It's not technically a fridging, because she fights, like, she has agency in that scene. She makes a choice. It's not like a kidnapping and a death, but it still feels like a fridging just because of the backstory stuff. It just, it's hard for me to fathom like the decision to kill her off the way they did, to give her she only speaks, I think, 6 lines in the movie.
And I
She
think what
very
happened
little.
was you talk about
Yeah.
somebody was talking about like conflicts. She was doing Silo, and she had something else she was. So I think
Yeah.
she bounced back
It
and
could
forth
be.
in this production. She wasn't in this production all the time because she was doing other things. So I think maybe not. I have no clue what.
Yeah.
Maybe it was conflicts.
Yeah, if it is, like, I'm willing to like hold out hope and be like, part 2 might fix all of this, but like, I get concerned when the director has like said a lot of weird stuff about it. Like, I don't know if you've been watching his interviews, but he's been asked about like the reaction to Ilsa's death, and the way he describes Ilsa is like the opposite of how I view her. It's just, it's strange. He's talking like she's not going to come back, but it could just be like stuff. But I think also that just the behind the scenes of like, he wanted Haley Atwell to play Ilsa at first, but because of scheduling conflicts, it didn't happen. And now Ilsa dies in the first movie that Haley Atwell comes back. It's weird. It's a weird moment, and I feel like part 2 will possibly fix it. But at this point, I think the thing that really sticks out at me is that when Ilsa is introduced, like, let's say no one has watched Rogue Nation or Fallout, and they only had the beginning of this movie as a way to explain Ilsa. Kitteridge describes Ilsa in such a, he literally describes Ilsa as like, Ilsa, Faust, you've saved her countless times. And it's just like, no, Ilsa's saved Ethan countless times. Like I think 6 or 7 times. Ethan has saved Ilsa, but like, to describe her as you've saved her countless times, like, I'm just like, why are we even like using damsel in distress terminology with Ilsa when she's anything but? So I don't know. That was a long rant about Ilsa. You can tell that I'm one of those people that's upset over it, but luckily the movie is so long that like, I could literally avoid all the Ilsa stuff and have a lot of stuff to enjoy about the movie.
So my whole thing about this, because I've heard this criticism a lot, and for me, I totally get it because I absolutely adore Ilsa as a character. She's why, like you said, Charles, Rogue Nation Fallout are some of my favorite of the franchise because I think she was just such a great character to bring in. Um, I have like zero doubt that Christopher McQuarrie and Tom Cruise have more for Rebecca Ferguson in the next movie. And maybe that's
hope so.
why they're doing this whole killing her off thing in the first movie and kind of like minimizing her role in it is because of the conflicts. And they're like, let's make her more of a character in the second one. And the reason why I think that is just because, and I could be way off. You could be 100% right, Charles. I could be way off. And they just didn't plan it out well, and they just didn't think that maybe she was as beloved as she was, or I don't know. But Christopher McQuarrie picking it up with Rogue One through Dead Reckoning, not just that, but being heavily involved in my favorite movie of last year, Top Gun Maverick. I just think that his production, like writing and all this stuff, with Tom Cruise, I just think it's like kind of second to none. And then that's why I love if they're teaming up for something, I'm there because I just think it's going to be fantastic. So that's why I'm more than holding out hope that she's going to play more of a role in part two, because I think it's like going to happen. I'm like, it's like Dan Skip Allen saying that Diane Warren is about to win an award for 80 for Brady. But before I get him on a tangent,
oh gosh, that's
I'm
great.
I'm pretty certain, but I could be wrong. I don't know.
I wanted to agree with you on that. Like, they are both the duo. They're so detail oriented, I feel like, and you're right, especially with the scripting, because like the script for Rogue Nation and Fallout is so good, and even for this one, it's really good in spots. I think my favorite theory about Ilsa, because I want to have more of your hope, Chad. My favorite theory I've read about it is that like Luther makes some comment about like the only way we can beat this AI is if we take a piece off the board, or if he doesn't know about another piece off the board. And then Luther's like, I gotta go away, I got something, and blah blah blah, and he just like leaves the movie. Part of me is hoping that like him and Ilsa, because they kind of have a camaraderie, they did something, and Ilsa's gonna come out of the submarine and just just kill everybody.
I think that will play into part two heavily, is because they are sitting there trying to, fool the AI.
Yes.
And because of that, somehow they might have to fool us, the audience.
Yes. Yeah.
Going into part two. And I know we've been on Dead Reckoning for a long time talking about Elsa Faust, but it is very important. She means a lot to this franchise. So, I love you bringing that up, Charles, and us having that discussion. If there's nothing else, James started. Dan can start with Ghost Protocol. All right, cool. Go take it away, Dan.
We're doing number three not yet. We're not doing our number threes.
Well, it's because everyone had like Ghost Protocol like lower. So I'm just saying we can, and you can say where it is or not.
Okay, all right, got it. No. I'm glad you explained that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no worries.
This was easier for Indiana Jones because there wasn't as many films. It's a little bit more confusing with 7 films and 5 films or whatever it was. Yeah, I have Ghost Protocol number 1. I'm a absolute defender of this film. I think this is the peak of the Mission Impossible franchise. I think, using the word peak, the Burj Khalifa, the largest building in the world.
Yeah.
Tom Cruise is hanging outside of this building. He did his own stunts. There's a sandstorm, cars blowing him off that freaking sandstorm thing. This him hanging out this building, doing all this stuff, fake out these people, going from room to room, setting up and getting Jeremy Renner, and I don't know if I froze this for a second there.
Yep.
But Jeremy Renner, Paul Patton were brought into the franchise here. I just think I saw this about 3 days early when it first came out, and I saw it in IMAX, and I was just blown away by the IMAX way Brad Bird filmed it. This guy is known for animated movies, and he comes in and he just knocks it out of the absolute park. We get stuff that we get to go forward with in the future with some of these characters like Benji and Luther, and I just think this is. They've been really good after this. Don't get me wrong. Like Rogue Nation and Fallout have been really good after this, but I don't think they've gotten to the peak of Mission Impossible since this one. And I like the villain. I like the villain in this one. Oh God,
Michael Nyquist.
Yeah, I love him. I freaking love this guy. I mean, I've watched him in a couple different things since then, and the he just plays menacing. You know, I still think Philip Seymour Hoffman's the best villain in the whole thing, but this guy is really nasty. But I think Rogue Nation, Ghost Protocol is the best one. I'm the defender of this one. I will always defend this one, but I guess it's because I like it so much. Maybe I got blinders on or something. I don't know.
Great movie.
I think it makes a ton of sense, to be honest, Dan. I know there's a lot of people who actually have this at number one because it was the one that elevated the action sequences so well. Honestly, I don't think they've topped the Burj Khalifa sequence. I think that one is probably still like the best one. They keep trying to top it, and I just think it's so cool. As soon as and I want to throw in there, I love that they made Simon Pegg Benji more of a character in this, because he is probably like the best addition to the team other than Ilsa Faust. But I love Simon Pegg so much in this. He brings so much comic relief, but he's also just a really good character. He plays a lot of really good character in Fallout as well. I know that 3, he was not as much of a character. I know Simon was going through some alcohol problems and stuff like that, but as soon as he got clean and stuff, he became like a way better actor. He just has been on a tear, especially in the Mission Impossible franchise. And that as soon as they're the only way to access that one room is from the outside, and Thomas Cruise is like, what? It's like, what?
And Benji's just like, easy. You can do this.
Every single movie, Ethan has to do something batshit insane, and Benji's just like, Ethan's
you got this.
I believe in him. And just that sequence, just every single thing with it, where he's climbing, he loses the one glove, he slips and falls I don't know how far.
Oh, tense.
So tense. And then he turns around and goes, what the hell is that? And you see the storm coming in, you're just like, oh no, this guy's gonna die. And him getting in, kicking into the thing, and then as soon as the time's running out, you have Léa Seydoux coming and stuff like that, and he's got to jump out and run and basically swing and fly into the thing, and how they caught his leg and pulled him in. I don't know, it's just such a great sequence. I think it's the best. I love it so much. But there's more movie than just that. I love the team forming after they've kind of been disavowed and we're on our own now. I love how that forms. This is also the one that starts in the prison. And I think that's really
the Russian prison. The Russian prison was so funny because he's in prison.
So wait, are you Sergey? You're not Sergey?
Sergey.
It's so fun. There's just so much stuff in this to love. Just the camaraderie between Ethan and Benji, where he's open the door, and then he's like, I'm not opening that door, and he's like, well, I'll wait. Just shit like that is just the best. Them driving the car down the stairs, and everything. Just the action isn't really incredible, but the arc of the team forming, I think, is the most incredible thing about Ghost Protocol 2, is that it just also has a good story. I do think that the villain in this one I think he's better than in 1 and 2, but I think he's probably the weakest other than that, because like the other villains have been like persisting in multiple movies and have been developed more and stuff like that. But this one, I think, is a little bit forgettable, even though I think he's like really crazy and badass when he's like, I'm gonna kill myself so that these torpedoes or whatever or missiles can actually launch. And like when he hits that car falling down, and then the whole, Ethan driving the car down, dropping the car down, that whole sequence in the parking garage, so tense. It kind of rivals Fallout a little bit there, I think, towards the end with is he going to do it? Is he going to hit that button and,
Yeah.
whatever? Yeah, I think it's incredible. I love it. Kerri, Ghost Protocol.
Yeah, Ghost Protocol. This is my number 2. Really just because I like the story of my number 1 just a little bit more. But this one, I think, I can't remember if you said it or if Dan said it, but I agree that they haven't, that Burj Khalifa scene is, I think, the best.
I said that.
One of the best stunt sequence in all of the franchise. And and on top of that, and that scene, I love it so much because it's not just the tenseness, but I think the comedy falls in so well in combination with the tenseness. It's just done so fantastically. And Tom Cruise and Simon Pegg, this is the first movie where they really are playing off of each other and showing, how effective a comedic duo they can be.
Yeah.
And then I love Paula Patton in this movie. I really wish they continued her character in the franchise. Maybe, for whatever reason she couldn't or didn't want to come back. I hope I hope she couldn't come back and that's why she isn't in the franchise anymore. I thought her character was fantastic and I wish we had seen more of her overall. The only thing I kind of dislike about this movie, again, this is really nitpicky at this point, is I think it's kind of funny. Like Tom Cruise lets Jeremy Renner think this whole movie that Jeremy Renner got
I like that
got
story,
Julia
though.
killed. Yeah, but I'm like, you give the guy a break, man. Like you obviously, I guess he kind of doesn't fully maybe trust him or something until the end. I'm not sure. Or he sees how much it's eating at him. He didn't realize it would eat at him that much. That's kind of my only tiny little thing with this movie. It's not really anything. It's so nitpicky.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think this one is just incredible.
And I gotta say, Jeremy Renner was a fantastic addition. I love the whole sequence under the water and like distracting the people firing and stuff like that. And the sequence with Leia Sadu. I'm sad that he's kind of like not in it anymore, and what happened to him and stuff like that as well.
He's like franchise kryptonite, like Born, out of there. Mission Impossible, out of there.
I hope he gets better and then he can come back in some way. But before we move on to Charles, I do want to say I love one of my favorite parts is Paula Patton kicking Leia Sadu out the window.
Yeah, that's great.
I think it was money. I think it was a contract dispute why she didn't come back. She wanted me.
Gotcha.
I believe. Don't quote me on that.
Charles.
Yeah, I appreciate that you gave Paula Patton a shout out, Kerri, because she's great in this, and I'm also glad that Jeremy Renner brought up, because he's both a strength of this movie, but on rewatch, it hurts my enjoyment of this movie, because even though I love like the continuity that like some of the Mission Impossible movies do, one of the things that does frustrate me is how like some characters are just kind of like dropped or like just go nowhere, and Jeremy Renner's character is kind of one of those casualties. He has kind of an interesting backstory. He has good chemistry with Ethan and Benji. He seems like a good fit. And then in the next movie, he's in the secretary position, I guess. I don't know. Maybe there were scheduling conflicts and they needed him to have a lesser role. But then he just kind of follows Ethan around until the end. And then he's just out of the movie franchise. So I don't know, maybe Dead Reckoning Part 2 will find a way to bring him back, and if so, that will maybe help. But for me, I found all those parts that were spent developing his character that normally I enjoyed. I found those parts kind of weighed down my rewatch because I felt like, well, it's not going to really matter too much anyways. We already know that this isn't a real problem for Ethan, and I already know that you're like, this is kind of it for you in a way too. But he's still a great part of this movie. I think if I think about his future outside of it, I think it's okay. I think Benji, I want to agree that Benji's one of, this is where he becomes really like the fan favorite he is now. Like he's such a juggernaut. Like they threaten to kill him off in every single one, like to the point where even in Fallout he's hanging and Elsa is like trying to save him, and the whole time you're like, don't you kill Benji, no, Elsa. Like just like I remember the whole time. I think I watched this with you and Kerri, Chad, and Hannah, but I remember the whole time being like, they're not gonna kill Benji, they're not, like saying it to Hannah the whole time during the sequence. So Benji, he became the juggernaut he is because of this movie. And he provides a lot of pathos, and I love the payoff to his character arc in this one, where he's the one to go. He like is the one that kind of brings everything to a success at the end of the movie by him like being comfortable with this gun, being comfortable being a field agent. And I believe he's the one that shoots the last guy at the end of the movie. I think the other things, Dubai sequence, yeah, Burj Khalifa was incredible. I agree. I don't know if that was topped either. I think the other thing I wanted to shout about this movie is the heist in India. I think is kind of underrated. I don't know if it was intentional or not, but I felt like there was a lot of shots that were homages to the first one. And in fact, there's even a same sequence where they're on like this giant royal staircase, like they are in the first movie. Mm-hmm. And Ethan is having to like identify all of the crucial targets, just like it is in the first movie. Then you also have Benji directing Jeremy Renner's character through like a vent, kind of eerily similar to the elevator sequence. And then eventually Ethan has to run out and go after the villain, similar to the first one. I don't know. It felt like an homage, and it helped too that I think the way Tom Cruise plays it, I could be wrong, but on rewatch, I felt like out of all like the missions, he felt especially tense in this one. And I do wonder if like that was Tom Cruise's decision because the mission was so similar to Mission Impossible 1. Maybe he was feeling like, oh crap, I might lose my whole team again. But overall, I really love Ghost Protocol, and I can understand why it's your favorite, Dan, because I think, if I'm being honest with myself, this is the movie that made me a Mission Impossible fan. Previously, I would just be like, oh, Mission Impossible's on, cool, I'll give it a watch. But this one made me be like, I got to watch the next one in theaters.
Yeah. And I do want to throw two things out that will actually transition into James talking. One is that I think Jeremy Renner has like one of the best lines in the whole movie is the next time I get to seduce the rich guy.
Oh, yeah.
And then going to James, James and I also saw this in theaters. Well, at least the last hour of it.
We saw some of it.
What happened?
Part of it. I don't know. We bought the tickets and it was for the right show time. I don't know if we walked in the wrong theater or if something was misprinted, but we end on the scene with them, chasing Michael Nyquist down the thing, and they're in the like the Carvana style working like car vending machine thing, and he falls down. I'm like, all right, this has to be the opening scene, and we're watching it. I'm like, this is going on way too long to be the opening scene. Are we at the end of this thing? And lo and behold, we walked in somehow in the end bit of it. So. Yeah.
That's really funny.
Yeah.
What do you think about the movie?
I definitely like this movie a lot. It is number 4 on my list, though. I think it really did help kind of solidify that Mission Impossible could be like a legit series. I know there was kind of like ups and downs in the first 3, but I think this one, the term well-oiled machine was thrown out earlier, and I agree completely with that. I do like the inclusion of Benji in this movie a lot more than the third one. I think it was a good direction for them to take with that. I liked this scene, even just the smaller bits, like when he's in the hospital and he's on that ledge about to jump down, leaning out the edge, looking at him like he like motions down like that. Like, you go ahead, jump, man. Like, that's not such a good idea now, isn't it? He's like, no, not really. Sure. I like that kind of bit. Yeah, until the van drives by. But that's such a great one. I love the Burj Khalifa scene when he's got the rope and he's trying to swing down to some window, and Benji's like, or I think Paul Patton's character's like, your rope's too short. He's like, oh shit. Like, I think just that kind of line is just so great in that movie. Finally gets up back in the room, and Benji walks in. He's like, oh man, because he had to go like switch the label on two of the doors outside or something. He's like, oh man, that was so hard. I can't believe I did that one. And Tom Cruise just like scaled up the whole building, kind of like this kind of like comic relief bits are so good, which I do appreciate when done right. I know I've talked about like Marvel movies, specifically the comic kind of takes away from it, but I definitely like the inclusion of Simon Pegg as much as they did in this movie. There was one small Easter egg that I really, really appreciate anytime I see anything Brad Bird or Disney related. After Tom Cruise gets out of the hospital, I forget what the line was specifically, but it's some like group recall code, but it says like group recall code Alpha 113, which is A113, which is that animation studio and the California Art Institute or California Institute of Art, where like the Disney animators like learn their craft, kind of like where a lot of them like kind of went to school. So you see it all over. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so see it all over the Disney and the Pixar films. It's in most of them, but I just kind of love that little callback to Brad Bird's time with all that. So that kind of stuff makes me happy. I did like the kind of callbacks, like the first one, like what Charles was talking about. There's even a bit where he like kind of falls too close to the floor, like he's like an inch or two off.
Yeah, you're right.
And I was like, all right, that's a pretty good callback. It shows they're really paying attention. They know what they're doing. I would say I usually plug this in all like my little bits of these videos. If I'm going to rewatch any of these movies, it's probably going to be 4, because I think it's the one I had the most fun watching. Like, as good as all the ones are, like I said before, they up the stakes, they up the scenes, they up the stuff, all that good stuff. This is probably the one I rewatched the most out of all 7 of these. I just have the best time watching this movie. It's a great one.
Yeah, and another great scene that I don't think we really talked about was the Kremlin scene. Because I love that's like
yeah,
kind of like it's Benji's like
with the screen.
The screen is such really cool technology, but I love that it's kind of like Benji's like first like field mission, and like he's going and he's so excited. He doesn't get to wear the face, but or actually no one's wearing a face. It's just heavy makeup, and then like when Ethan has to sit there and like act like the guy, and he just looks annoyed when the guy doesn't recognize him as the actual guy he is. Then Benji's like, you're gonna get it for this or something like that. And then when he makes the mistake of like going in front of the camera and really big, it's just so great. Now we are moving on to our threes. So that we can get that information. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. Dan, what is your 3?
My 3 would be, because I already said my number 1, so my number 3 is Fallout.
All right, my number 3. Hold on, I had it up. Is I already said Dead Reckoning Part 1. Kerri, what is your 3?
Sorry, my number 3 is Rogue Nation.
All right, Charles, 3.
Mine is Mission Impossible 3.
That's right. James, 3.
Mine is Mission Impossible 5, Rogue Nation.
Rogue Nation. All right. Do we have enough to talk about Rogue Nation now, or should we just
We should do our twos, yeah.
All right, 2s. My 2 is Rogue Nation. Kerri, what's your 2?
My 2, we already talked about Ghost Protocol.
All right. Charles, 2.
Rogue Nation is my number 2.
James, 2.
I had Fallout, number 2.
And Dan, 2.
Rogue Nation. Rogue Nation.
All right. Looks like we're talking Rogue Nation before we get into our 1s.
Yeah.
Sounds good. I'll go ahead and start with Rogue Nation. I think this one's incredible. This one opens like a duology between that and Fallout, where we get introduced to Ilsa Faust. Such a great character. Now I'm actually trying to remember the beginning of this movie. Oh, I love the fact that it's Ethan, and he's kind of like away now. Benji's kind of doing his thing. He's getting like weekly or daily polygraphs, and then he gets like the whole free ticket to an opera in where is it? Russia?
Italy.
Is it
It might have been Italy. Vienna. It was Vienna.
Yeah, there it is. So he goes there, and then it starts with the whole sequence and the fight sequence and the opera and stuff. I thought was like really incredible. So we have to talk about the big stunts. I love and the fact that Benji wants to stay, I think is amazing. He's like, no, we're doing this. And yeah, I love the jumping into the pool, the tank thing, because I think that's the next big sequence in this one, and I think that one's so incredible. I love that Benji kind of questions him, or not questions him, but he's like, oh wait, how long do you have to hold your breath? There's like 5 minutes or something like that, and
minutes.
Wait, like it's gonna have to be 6 minutes, and then it's like, oh, easy, it's a piece of cake.
Yeah. No, and the whole time Ethan is just like you can see he's like almost having a panic attack.
And I just love how all that is set up, where it's such an intricate, like, cool kind of, this is how you got to do it. And the sensors are going to know you're an imposter until someone switches those cards. And then this is one of those times, Charles, like you alluded to, where Ilsa saves Ethan, and then subsequently like backstabs them, and she's like, no, that's my thing, and that's my information that you got. And then but I think Benji made like a backup or whatever, because he's Benji, and why not do that? And then that leads to the thing that I alluded to much earlier, the amazing motorcycle chase that I just think is so cool. They're doing the thing where they're going, so far down that they're almost he is scraping the ground, and I don't know, it's just so fast, and I just love that this is another thing that Tom Cruise can do. And I don't know if like Rebecca Ferguson was actually doing that, because I think she had a helmet on, so it's probably a stunt driver. But like Tom Cruise can actually do that shit, and I thought that was like really incredible. I love everything with Solomon Lane. I think he's a really cool menacing villain. How he starts out with the gas or whatever, and then how it ends with him being gassed in the box that they put him in, and they kind of like told him that they were going to put him in a box, and then they do it. And I just love how that all plays out. It's so incredible. I'm actually trying to remember a lot from this movie, because I think Rogue One and Fallout do bleed a little bit, because I love them both so much, but I'm trying to remember specific parts of specific movies here. So you guys could probably help clarify that a little bit. That's Rogue One. I adore it. Kerri, did I say Rogue One? Rogue Nation.
I know that's hard to remember.
I do not like Rogue One.
80s.
Whoa! Don't say that now.
What?
You don't like Rogue One.
I don't. Go ahead, Rogue Nation.
Get him off here, Kerri. Get him off of here right now.
It's my show. It's my show.
I don't care if it's your show or not. I don't care if it's your show or not.
Are you sure?
Yes, it did, maybe.
I think Chad hates it because I'm pretty sure he had a debate against
That's
it.
not the whole truth. Go ahead.
Okay. This one for me, it's number 3 just because I like Ghost Protocol and Fallout a little bit more. This one, it's so fun. It just keeps the pace. For me, I think the stunts are a little bit better in Ghost Protocol, and I think the story's a little bit better in Fallout. That's really the only reason Rogue Nation is my number 3. But I think this movie is fantastic. It's so much fun. The stunts are still incredible. I love Rebecca Ferguson in this.
Absolutely. Charles, Rogue Nation.
Yeah, I I don't know. I love this movie so much. It's going to be hard for me to prevent myself from cheesing on camera about this movie, because like I have such like, I don't know. I love this movie and Fallout so much. I think they're like almost perfect. I think for me, what I really like about this is I think it does a really good job of mixing in the action sequences with authentic espionage. I do think in like Mission Impossible 3 on, the espionage kind of takes a back seat for most of the movies for action, and that's not a bad thing. I really enjoy the action, but like I felt like there was a good healthy mix of it in this movie. I also enjoyed kind of how it juggles a little bit more characters in this one, a little bit more smoothly, and I think it's benefited from the fact that we get more perspectives with the introduction of Ilsa. We actually get a lot of extended sequences that are only from her perspective, and that's kind of a rarity for Mission Impossible. Most of it is done from Ethan's perspective, but I think it's better for it because it really kind of tells more of an epic story. And it's rare that you have a movie with two protagonists in a way, kind of, and they're at each other's throats at other times, saving each other in other times, and then there's a villain. It's a really interesting story structure, and it's a more complicated one. I feel like every opera scene before this movie walked, so this one could run. I am confident saying that this is the best because this is kind of a cliche now. Like John Wick, I'm pretty sure does this in John Wick 2. But the like action movies are kind of known now for like having a random opera sequence in and like oh, and then like oh yeah, it's done in Fifth Element too in a way. And like then there's like a gunfight, and that one's a great one. Not to knock Fifth Element.
It's a great one.
Yeah, that one's a good one too. But this one is just so amazing at showing, not telling. It's basically for about 5 to 6 minutes. There's no dialogue at all. It's just music, and you're just seeing Benji searching. You're seeing Ethan fighting in the rafters. You're seeing Elsa setting up. Just everything's being shown. You see the president coming in. And I'm a big fan of Show Don't Tell because of Better Call Saul. I think like this, even though it could be more slow that way, I think it pays off in tension. And even though it's cheesy to say, you could argue that the entire sequence has movements like the opera itself that is playing. As the song changes, the tensity increases, or not tensity, the tension increases. I also want to back up Chad on I think a Morricone sequence. Is that where it is? Morricone heist. The whole heist with the underwater sequence. I think it's the best sequence in all of the Mission Impossible movies, and not because it's like individually really good, but because it builds so well. Like it is for about 30 minutes. It starts off as like a funny back and forth with Benji. Like he's the one in the field completely, and Ethan is the behind the scenes person this time around, which is kind of cool. And you have the tension of him trying to go undercover, breaking through the base, and then Ethan is completely submerged. Again, barely any dialogue. You see they did come up with a great visual indicator for his oxygen that really shows you everything you need to know as that keeps going down. Ilsa coming in and saving, although you know it's going to happen, it's so dire that when she comes in and saves him and does it so quickly, it's just it's I've never seen a character like become so endeared to them so quickly. And I think this kind of merges into why I love this movie so much. Like Ilsa saves him. You're like, Ilsa is badass. Like I love my guys Luther and Benji, but Ilsa is like up here after that. But then immediately after that, Ilsa like shocks Benji, and you're like, what? And then Ilsa runs off, and then you're like, so Ilsa's working for the bad guys, but then Ilsa knocks all the bad guys off on the motorcycle and drives. Then you're like, wait, I don't know, who does she work for? Wait, she's a rogue nation. Oh my god! And so like it's just like you're going through so many phases, and then Ethan's chasing after her, and then they're on the highway, and it keeps building, and then Ilsa goes off in the middle of the road, and then Ethan doesn't want to kill her. And you're like, yeah, definitely. What? No, don't kill Ilsa. So then he literally sacrifices almost himself and goes off the cliff almost. I think it brings me to my central point about this movie. I think Ilsa is incredible in this movie. Rebecca Ferguson is amazing. I'm so happy for her career after this movie. It really blew up. And you can see why after this movie. She is incredible. She makes everything. She adds like a layer of seriousness and pathos to the movies where like it's still fun, but it feels a little bit more serious this time around because Ilsa has a legitimate motivation for all of her actions. She's trying genuinely to do the right thing, and yet she's having to juggle the interests of so many people. I would argue that she has the more difficult job than Ethan. She has the actual impossible mission, and she pulls it off by the end, which is really wonderful. I think it may be a hot take too, but I think this movie makes Rebecca Ferguson in the Mission Impossible franchise, at least for the next 2 movies, almost as valuable to the franchise as Tom Cruise. And it almost, I did think after a certain point, despite what happens in part 1, I did actually think at some point she would take over just because of how magnetic she was in Rogue Nation. But I don't know. Maybe she's coming back in part 2. We'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. James, Rogue Nation.
Yeah, I liked Rogue Nation a whole lot. It is a great movie for the Mission Impossible series. I have it number 3. Yeah, just like how, again, they keep, like I've said before, they keep making the stunts bigger. The story just gets better. And I feel like this one, like, even though I don't think by the end, like how much of this continues on the 6th, but it definitely, like, this is like the one where, like, it starts like a continued, like, story for this, like, where there could be some, like, continuity here, which is really, really cool.
Yeah.
I like the way that they did that. I do like Solomon Lane. He's a pretty good villain. That actor Sean Harris is pretty cool. I think it's cool that they introduce like a possible like kind of like group of like the syndicate is what it's called. So it's like a group of like villains, not just one like main kind of bad guy sort of thing. I like the direction they went with that. Yeah, I like the direction they took with that. The plane scene was awesome in the beginning when he's hanging on the outside of it. That's such a cool scene. I love that every time. I know, Chad, you talked about what scene scared the shit out of you in the beginning of the 3rd one when Kerri Russell like dies, but in this one it's jumping down that freaking water spout thing. Like that's not something you're ever supposed to do ever. If you see one of those things, I know when like in the real world, like in like nature shit, it's like just a drain spout for like when lakes overflow and shit. But like if you fall down one of those, like you're pretty much dead. And so like just getting the overhead shot of like looking down in it, that's kind of gets me sometimes. I can't take that sometimes. But that was really, it was still a cool shot nonetheless. It's really tense when he's like underwater trying to swap out the 2 cards into the bays. Such a great shot. I love the story itself is done really, really well. I do like that a lot of it kind of does hang on like the inclusion of Ilsa Foss in this one. I think she really does kind of add like the extra kind of like X factor to this movie, which makes it really, really good. Overall, it's an awesome movie. I love it a lot.
Yeah, and I mixed up my Godfather movies, by the way. It's the 3rd Godfather that has the opera scene and all the stuff that's going on.
Oh yeah. Oh
Yeah.
And the 2nd Sherlock Holmes movie has an opera scene in it too.
Yeah, and I love the opera scene. One of the few things I like about the Godfather.
About the 3rd one, yeah.
Chad and I we talk ad nauseum about Godfather 3, but no, I love this and Ghost Protocol are my 2 favorites of the franchise. I just love the action scene, and like I don't want to seem like a broken record, but I agree with a lot of what Charles said. I mean, Rebecca Ferguson really came on the scene in this movie and just blew me away. Like, who the hell is this? And she does all this crazy stuff. You don't know whose side she on. But that water sequence to me is the 2nd best action sequence in all the Mission Impossible movies. I think it's an incredible. The tension is just so ramped up during that sequence. It's ridiculous, Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Which one was the one where he's hanging off the side of a plane? Was that this or Fallout?
That was Rogue Nation. Yep.
Rogue Nation. Oh yeah, that's how it starts.
Other door.
Yeah, that's a great one too.
And I'm like, how the hell?
The wrong door.
Yeah, it's a wrong. I mean, it's like this guy is incredible. I mean, he could have died. He literally could have died so many times in this franchise, and it's like. You got look. He says, "I make movies for the theater experience. I make movies for the fans, and all this kind of stuff." I understand, Tom Cruise. I agree. We know that you make movies for the fans, for the big screen, man. Because these movies just kept on getting better and better with these action sequences. And I mixed up my villains too. I actually like this villain, Solomon. Is it Kane or Lane?
Lane,
yeah.
Better than the one in Ghost Protocol. This guy,
This is the guy I was talking about. This guy has got a really good career going. He's just so menacing and nasty, you know. I think he's in 2 of the movies though, isn't he? He's not just in this one, isn't he?
He's in Fallout as well.
Yeah, he's in 2 of the movies, so that's interesting.
Yeah.
They brought a villain back movie. I guess they liked him so much in this one that they brought him.
He's
And like you said, the
still alive. He
syndicate,
could
so
come
all
back
the
in
villains
part
in all
two.
the movies are connected. I mean, this is the movie where, granted, Ghost Protocol probably had a lot of things that connected to like a James Bond, but this one, they said, we're James Bond from America. Ethan Hunt is James Bond. Nobody's ever going to have the name James Bond. Well, you have all these different James Bonds, but Ethan Hunt is Ethan Hunt. And I think you're never going to see anybody ever play Ethan Hunt ever again. Tom Cruise will be the guy that plays his character as long as he can play it. But I believe that there's a chance. I mean, listening to you, Charles, I think we could get a spinoff with Rebecca Ferguson, and she could have been doing Dune 2. You know, she could have been doing Dune 2, and that kind of caused her to kind of bounce off of this and then come back to this. You know, so she might have been a bigger character if it wasn't for Dune 2. You know, because I remember an interview they're saying that she was doing Dune 2, or she was doing this. She had to leave and go do Dune 2, and that's why they went to the desert so she could do something, you know.
That's right.
That's why they went to Tunisia, because she was already at Tunisia doing Dune 2, and they were like, we needed her back or whatever. And so that's why they set that whole scene. That wasn't originally in the story, that whole stuff in the desert and all that.
That's
stuff.
cool.
But I mean, I love this movie. That water sequence is just incredible for me. I mean, it's incredible. But I had Rogue Nation at number 2. And we're Kerri. We got to kick Chad off this call, off this show. I know it's his show because he doesn't like Rogue One.
Rogue One.
We already did Star Wars, you know,
for
another day. But I do want to say, Ilsa Faust, GOAT. I get it. Rebecca Ferguson's fantastic. She's kind of like blowing up now, but underrated. Rose the Hat, Dr. Sleep.
So good in that too. You're right.
And in Rogue Nation, I love when she does that one thing where she's talking to Solomon Lane, but before she like jumps up and like grabs the dude with her legs or whatever, and like, you know, defeats him like that, and then he gets killed because of that. So she's so badass. All right, we're gonna get to our number ones because we haven't said that yet, and then we're gonna talk about the only movie that we haven't discussed yet. Kerri, what is your number 1? You could just shout it.
I'm sorry. It's Fallout.
Fallout, she said. Charles, what is your number 1?
Fallout as well.
James, what is your number 1?
I had Dead Reckoning Part 1, but Fallout's number 2. That's my number 2. Right. So yeah.
Dan, say it.
Ghost Protocol was number 1. Fallout was number 3.
All right, and Fallout is also my number 1. I started the last one. So Kerri, do you want to start the Fallout discussion?
Yeah. Sorry. This one's just my favorite because I love the story of this one so much. I think the twists in this are really good. They're really fun. Every time I watch it, I almost forget that like it's actually Benji sitting in that chair and that Henry Cavill, you know, the bad guy. I love that they bring Julia back and we kind of get a nice little closure to her story. We get to see what she's doing. We get to see she's having a happy life. She's happily married. And Tom Cruise gets that little bit of closure too. I think Ethan Hunt gets to see that she has moved on and she's happy. And I think that kind of enables him to move forward in the next movie. I love the helicopters. Like, I think the whole end sequence is so fantastic in this movie. It's so tense. You've got kind of 3 different things going on. I like that Julia jumps in and helps out Luther, and they have this sweet little connection. I love just the helicopter scenes, and every time I'm like, oh yeah, they're on 2 separate helicopters. How the heck is Ethan Hunt going to get over to the other helicopter? He's driving it.
Yeah.
I think it pays off really well. And I love that one sequence where Ethan's kind of thinking about how he would, kill all of the security guards or something that are securing Solomon Lane. And it's kind of this, it's no dialogue. It's just like set to kind of music. And they go through that whole sequence. Like that to me is just a very innovative sequence in this franchise. Overall, just for me, this is the most enjoyable one to watch.
Mhm.
Yeah, and speaking of that helicopter sequence, I think that like foreshadowed to what we were going to get in Top Gun Maverick, which I think is even more impressive. But like right up there, just everything Tom Cruise can do aerially, I just think is incredible. Charles, do you like?
Yeah. Yeah. Fallout is. I think there's a world that if Dead Reckoning Part 1 and Part 2, Dead Reckoning seems to be setting up a finale for Ethan. At least I think it is. Because I don't think Tom Cruise plans on doing more Mission Impossible movies after Dead Reckoning, but I could be wrong. Even if Dead Reckoning is supposed to be the finale to Ethan Hunt's story, there's a world where Fallout is the end of Ethan's story, and it would be actually a really interesting finale. I think Fallout acts as a really strong conclusion to Ethan's story in a lot of ways. But before I kind of get to the story parts I think one of the biggest things I noticed rewatching is the use of sound in this movie, I think is a huge strength. Not only is the soundtrack by Lorne Balfe really good, who does the soundtrack for some TV shows like his Dark Materials, but the sound design is even better. Like there are multiple moments like in the club fight scene where it is like absolute silence except for the screams, gunshots, and then like some pulsing house music in the background. It's amazing. And then during the skydive sequence, you basically have Lorne Balfe doing almost a Zimmer-esque soundtrack as it's like bum, 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 and it's like it's almost like you're watching Interstellar with a No Time for Caution docking sequence. And I'm a sucker for that type of intensity. I think this is the loudest Mission Impossible movie, and I think it starts with the sound design. I think the sound design, like even just going immediately from Rogue Nation to this movie feels more important than a lot of the other Mission Impossible movies, and I think it's a big part of the sound. Henry Cavill is such a great addition too. We've been talking about favorite villains, and there's a lot of good villains. Henry Cavill would be maybe my second favorite villain. I think it's because he's so different from the other villains. He has this untapped aggression. Everybody talks about like the reloading of the fists, but it's amazing. And it also helps that he fights completely different from Ethan, just full on brutality. And it's wonderful on a rewatch, knowing obviously that he's the villain at the end of the movie. But whenever Ethan does something kind-hearted or tries to save someone, every time he like looks at Ethan and is just like, what the fuck is wrong with this dude? Like just get the job done. Like, what's so hard about that? And I love that part of him. Like, I can understand that aspect of him, and it really culminates with Ethan hanging from the elevator. And like, he could kill Ethan Hunt right now, but he's just like, it's not really like effective to do that, so I'm just not going to. It's great. I think Alec Baldwin has a really good exit in this movie. And his whole death, even though it's kind of sad in the movie, I think it's fine. And it's kind of fun to see him team up with the team a little bit. And the Benji switcheroo is great. Benji finally gets to wear his mask and have his moment, like speaking to the villain. It's such a fun sequence. It still holds up so well. I think the last two things are mostly about the climax I wanted to talk about. I think the climax is my favorite climax out of all the Mission Impossible movies. And it's because of how conclusive everything feels. Bringing Julia back into the fold felt really natural. And when she like surprises Ethan and it's like, Ethan? Like, and Ethan turns around and sees her, it's such like a full circle moment. You're like, and it really pays off if you started with Mission Impossible 3. And it really helps things feel full circle. I love the interactions that Julia and Elsa get together. It's some tiny moments, but it's really special. I love seeing Julia interact with Luther and help defusing the bomb. And I think the editing in the final sequence is so good. And I think they replicated it a little bit with Dead Reckoning Part 1, but this one had more pieces juggled, so this one felt a little bit more tense for me. I loved seeing basically Benji and Lane try and take out down Lane. They literally have Benji hanging from a noose for like, it feels like minutes of this sequence, and you are constantly on edge. And again, this is why Elsa is so loved. Elsa saves Benji like multiple times and knocks out Lane. It's such a tense sequence, and it's incredible to watch on rewatch, even though we know Benji's going to be safe. Overall, I think Fallout is probably like Mission Impossible working like with all of its strengths. So much works. There's so many callbacks. There's great action sequences. The soundtrack is incredible. The acting is incredible. Things are brought full circle. And it makes me truly wonder like how the stakes are going to possibly be raised further in Dead Reckoning Part 2, because I've already felt like Ethan's story is kind of concluded after Fallout. But part of me is kind of wondering, okay, maybe there's something we're missing, and there's something else that Ethan needs conclusion for Dead Reckoning Part 2.
Yeah, and the one thing that I want to, because brilliantly said everything you just said, when you talked about the club sequence and described how how awesome that is and the sound and stuff like that, I think that might have been an influence from John Wick, because John Wick has done a lot of great like club sequences, fighting in the middle of the club stuff going on.
So good.
And then we've seen ever since like Fallout, with Dead Reckoning Part 1 had a club sequence, and in the background you heard like the kind of like operatic like score that was going on inside of the club. I'm like, wait a second, is that them playing the score for the movie inside of the club? So anyways, I love how these big amazing action franchises are like influencing each other. But James, what did you think about Fallout?
This was overall like a fantastic movie. I absolutely love Fallout for pretty much all the reasons that Charles has kind of touched upon, like the story itself. Like at the end, you're just so on the edge of your seat. And to speak to the editing, like it's them running through the camp trying to find the nuclear bomb, and it's Tom Cruise on the edge of that cliff. But the way they shoot it at the very end, the camera kind of like pans around Tom Cruise to like align with, I think it's like the sunset or the sunrise and shit like that. There's no sound. You almost get the impression the bomb went off. And then it cut back to the camp, and then they saved the day. So for that split second, you're like, oh my God, did like they all just get like nuked almost or something like that? And I think that really is something that they did so well. It made me like that movie a whole lot. I know we were talking about Tom Cruise almost killing himself with some of his stunts, and he breaks his ankle on one of them when he jumps to one of the buildings. In this one, it's he actually legit injures himself.
Whoa! I didn't know that.
Yeah, he actually sprained his ankle on that one, or busted his ankle on that scene. And I do love the beginning.
Dedication. Dedication. Tom Cruise.
Yeah, for sure. And I like the beginning scene when they jump out of the airplane. That was so cool. I will say everyone does like to talk about like Henry Cavill, like he is really great in this movie. He's such a good fighter. He's like a kind of perfect guy for the role. I will say I have to give mad props, however, to his mustache, because that is the mustache he was not allowed to shave for Justice League. All the shitty editing on his face as Superman in Justice League was because he was not allowed to shave it. I don't know why it was integral to the plot and the overall story of Mission Impossible Fallout, but he was not allowed to shave it Justice League. So props to that, I guess. I guess it makes him that more badass or something. But I like that, I suppose. That was really cool. But yeah, there's so many scenes in this that are awesome. The story's just done so well. Like everything just it really does like come together so well at the end too. Again, it's one of those things where they just keep on doing better with the plots, the storylines, the acting is just so good. The stunts are amazing. It's just a fantastic movie all around.
I wonder if, by the way, real quick, Dan, sorry. I wonder if maybe they had started filming and they had the mustache for continuity, but I think the mustache thing was in the contract. But yeah, anyways, Dan, go ahead.
Was it
on Justice League that caused that to happen? He was supposed to be doing this movie Fallout,
and then they had to call him back for those reshoots, and that's when they ended up having the problem. But
So
I
they
think,
already started filming, right?
yeah, why not makeup? You're telling me you can't match makeup wise, match that? I don't know. Well, I don't want to get into that, but I do want to say though, that bathroom fight scene, freaking awesome! I love that bathroom fight scene with Henry Cavill and some Asian guys. And then I'm with Charles though. I think of all the movies, this has got to be the best end sequence of all the movies because fact of the matter, you got the helicopters going off, and then you got them other guys over there trying to defuse the bomb, and they're all this stuff is going on at the same time, and you're editing back and forth between these two things, and it really was a great conclusion. Almost, I mean, Dead Reckoning Part 1 almost got to that level of like the conclusion of the movie in a way, but there was some stuff after the train sequence and stuff like that in Dead Reckoning Part 1. But this is basically the end of the movie. And, Charles, you're so eloquent when you talk, when it comes to this stuff. You really love this franchise. But bringing back his wife and having that call back, they really, and I keep wanting to say this every time I talk and I keep forgetting, they are so great at having callbacks to the previous movies and so forth. Like they want you to remember this is all in the same world. And each of these movies do have these various callbacks to the previous movies in some way or another. And so, Dead Reckoning Part 2 is going to have a bunch of callbacks to some of these other movies in some ways. You just got to wait and watch it. You know what I mean? But yeah, the helicopter sequence on the mountain is incredible. The bomb sequence is incredible. But yeah, by this point, these guys have such a great rapport with each other. Benji, Luther, all of these guys, Ethan. You know what I mean? It's pretty good. I mean, I remember seeing that Fallout in July of a few years ago, and I was like, wow, this is incredible.
Yes.
But I definitely like it better than Dead Reckoning Part 1. I think the overall package was better than Dead Reckoning Part 1. So that's why I have it at 3 and Dead Reckoning Part 1 at 4.
Yeah, I do think. Well, first I want to say, Dan reminded me of something about the bathroom sequence. I love the fact that that one dude is dead, and there's blood everywhere, and then she has the idea of oh no, you have a major nosebleed, and that's where all that blood came from.
And they built that bathroom from scratch. That was a complete hole. They built all that stuff, and they had to tear it apart with that fight on a stage. I do think Charles really hit it. Why this one is, I think, most people's favorite is because of the filmmaking. It's right up there with Top Gun Maverick, I think, with the filmmaking aspect of it, but also the story. I think the story is incredible. You hit on all of the the sound design, all the stuff. I think Fallout should have been kind of an Oscar contender like Top Gun Maverick was, but it's a late movie in a franchise or whatever. But it really ties kind of everything that came before it up together. I love all of the sequences, the skydiving part, the bathroom fight, and even just the non-action sequences, just the intrigue that they have, in that one little setting where Benji has to do the mask and they're trying to figure out what's actually going on. They have in the beginning, the whole Wolf Blitzer fake out.
I forgot about that.
It's really funny.
That was funny, yeah.
And Benji is Wolf Blitzer, so he gets a mask there too.
He does. That's great.
But yeah, and then you have all of that stuff. It just feels like a perfectly paced film. It feels like everything is just flowing until you get to that third act that is just one big action sequence, and it's so cool. They know exactly what they have to do, but they're like, how are we going to do it? We'll figure it the fuck out. I don't know. Let's go do it. We know exactly what we need to do, and we'll figure it out. And then they're like, can Ethan, get to that detonator in time? And he's like, I'll figure it out. And then he runs after the helicopter. And, that's kind of the thing. We just did Indiana Jones. I think Ethan Hunt is the most Indiana Jones character not named Indiana Jones, because he's always like a problem comes up and then he has to like figure it out like mid, doing something and improvise. And I just love that about Ethan, and that in sequence just shows he's just like, I'll figure it out. I'll in Dead Reckoning he does it too. Like, I'll get on that train somehow. We'll figure it out. Kind of a deal, which is really great. But yeah, the whole thing is just so tense. When he's and it's a lot of emotion too, which is really great. But then you go straight into the helicopter like fight, dropping the payload. He misses. And then, as soon as Henry Cavill realizes that he's being chased by Ethan, starts shooting at him, which is really crazy. Yeah, I don't love Henry Cavill just like in general, but I do think he's fantastic in the movie. I agree, he's like way up there as far as a Mission Impossible villain, because it is very unconventional and he's not like kind of revealed to be he's not revealed to be the villain until like halfway through, which I think is really cool. But there's a little bit of hints, like he seems like he's kind of dumb and arrogant and ignorant in the skydiving thing, where he gets knocked out and then Ethan has to save his life, which is an incredible sequence. But yeah, the tension and just him trying to get to that detonator is just so cool. I love all of that stuff. And then they return. This is kind of like a dangling helicopter kind of a thing that's happening. And then they do it with the train in Dead Reckoning Part 1. So yeah, I love a lot of that stuff. Ethan having to fight gravity is a whole thing. But yeah, it's an incredible movie, and I adore it to pieces. I do think it might be the peak. I'm hoping they can surprise us with Dead Reckoning Part 1, and it might blow our minds. But Fallout is one that is hard to live up to because it was so damn good. But the same creative team is behind the Dead Reckoning, so we'll see what they have planned. But yeah, that was our discussion. Kerri started Fallout, I believe, so we all talked about it.
I wanted to tell you, I wanted to build off something you said real quick about Henry Cavill. Like on like the skydiving sequence in particular, I think like him getting knocked out and being saved, like I think I could be wrong, but whenever we watched it this time, he pulls out his oxygen thing, like when Ethan has his back turned, and then Ethan turns around and is just like, what are you doing? And he fixes it. I feel like that's kind of almost your first hint that something's off, because he's basically testing Ethan, like, will he go the extra mile to save someone?
Yeah.
Like what can I exploit? And so it, like whenever I see that moment, it tells me like right away, like he's already like observing Ethan.
Yeah, so at first you think maybe he's just really dumb.
Yeah.
But then you go like, holy shit, he's like diabolical kind of a deal, like, and insane. But yeah, great point, Charles. So we all discussed this franchise. I think it's safe to get into the overall ranking. Normally Kerri does this, but we had a crying baby, so she stepped away to take care of the little boy, who will one day probably start ranking with us if we last that long. But
we can do the Paw Patrol movies later.
Do the Miss Rachel episodes. That's what he's watching right now. And yeah. All right. So we actually have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There are no ties. So at number 7, no one should be surprised. We have Mission Impossible 2. At number 6 is the original Mission Impossible. At number 5 is Mission Impossible 3. And then, like we've been saying, it just gets better from there, right? Maybe. We'll see. Because at number 4 is actually Dead Reckoning Part 1. People don't know what to think about that one yet. 3 is Dan's favorite, Ghost Protocol. 2 is not Charles's favorite. Did anyone have this as a favorite? Rogue Nation. And then number 1 is a lot of people's favorite, Fallout. We did it.
All right.
That's a good ranking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so, because we have like 4 through 7 in our top 4.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I think most people would probably agree. I know there's some OG defenders. There's some 3 defenders like Charles, which is it makes a lot of sense because it's great. But yeah, 4 through 7 are pretty tight. I'm so excited for Dead Reckoning Part 2. We'll have to I've been talking about like getting the panels back together when the new movies come out so that we can reestablish our rankings and say where does part 2 come into play in our rankings, and then reevaluate the ranking, and then just do a little mini review of part 2. That's what I've been thinking about doing. I think it's a really fun idea. So maybe
I love that idea.
Yeah.
whenever that comes out, we'll have to make another video.
Because if part 2's like really good, and whenever that comes out, it could change our opinions of part 1 as well. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I imagine it will. Thank you guys so much. This was a blast. As always. Check out, like, and subscribe to the channel. Try to get some more views on the video, so more people can notice them, see them, and enjoy them. Tell your friends, whatever. Watch a lot of the older videos, because I think this may be the 19th video. I'm not even sure. But there's a lot of them out there. We've done a bunch. I'm not going to rattle through all of them, but there's quite a slate there. So yeah, check them out, like and subscribe. And the one thing I forgot every single time, are you ranking with me?
Yes, we are ranking.
Yes,
we have
that's
ranked.
correct.